go in and see him.
Thank you.
Sleep in the same bed with her.
I'm thinking it that way.
No,
Oh, speaking of it up, there you go. You just do this yourself.
No. Tomorrow, actually, it is.
Is your birthday tomorrow? Sent her a message and said, hey, don't let me forget to bring Sophie's Scentsy order. So.
My sister was like, I don't.
She said she was gonna, she asked for
Sorry, I just shook my hand. They're freezing. I mean, I said shook my hand.
How's your week been? You been all right? How are you? I've seen you for a while. Been here. Yeah, seen like a lot, right? Trying to keep my head down instead.
There you go. Kicked in, everybody. Put their things up there already. Mayor, how are you?
tuition reimbursement.
Okay.
So I'm happy to talk to you. I know the process better than.
Yeah, I know. Started in full time. I get promoted
He is motivated.
until you see him. Hearing this morning,
He's gonna be good.
well, the thing is
Well,
he's already got a paramedic straight slot because his baby's due. That's what it is.
She is? She's here. She's in Matt's office. What? Not in the best spirit.
And I didn't put anything in the address, I mean, I didn't sign it.
I'm yelling at you.
She never has.
You know that. He's broken on Facebook. So are you telling me his wife? I looked it up on really known. Right? I'm sorry I brought it.
She's like, Grandma, can't talk to you, my sister. And I met Brittany as somebody else. And she's like, Grandma, it's okay. I said, I'll take you on a date. Like your sister. No. Because, well, I don't know who she'd go with. I don't know. Oh, my hell, sister.
Straight fundraiser.
City. Phone? I don't know. Computer, yes. I don't know. Matt, can she hook her phone up to the TV? I don't think it's.
I don't think
Phone.
so. Let me see.
Because I like just like.
Can Okay, let's go and get started. Is the recorder on?
Tell it to you.
Okay, we're ready. I'd like to welcome everybody out to the Roy City Council meeting for March 15th, 2020. Time is 5:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome and recognize that we have Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Scadden, Councilmember Joe Paul, Councilmember Wilson, and Councilmember Sophie Paul with us. If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to join me in a moment of silence, and then I'd like to lead you in a Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll take just a second, and let's do a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, thank you. If you'd like, would we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we've got 3 consent items. One is the request for approval of alcohol beverage license for Extra Mile number 238, located at 4805 South, 1900 West. We also have the approval of the January 18th, 2022 Roy City Council meeting minutes, also the approval of the February 1st, 2022 Roy City Council Town Hall meeting minutes. Okay, is there any comments or questions, council?
No.
Okay, then do I have a motion to approve the consent items as provided?
Motion to approve.
Okay, so Joe, and I think I heard Randy? Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. This is the public comment period. If you have something you'd like to share with us, please come up to the microphone. Just give us your name and address and share whatever you'd like to share. Anything? Okay. Hearing none. We'll move on to the action items. We do have one resolution, consideration of Resolution 22-3, a resolution for the Roy City Council approving ambulance transportation rates and charges. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. This resolution basically has changed from an annual council approval to, once this is approved, that it'll happen automatic. As the resolution alludes to, the state actually sets these rates. Under Rule 426-8, they basically set the rates, and they doing amendments to those rates every single year. And then the delay to get the council approval past that delays our billing process and stuff like that. So last year it was 5%, went up anywhere from $60 to about $85 per thing, what we were allowed to actual bill for. Billing, once again, was only for when we transport, under the law, is the only time when we can bill. Any other service is still completely free that we provide through the service. It's just when we transport that we can do that process. So this resolution basically is doing that and allows us every single year to just follow what the state sets for us. And it's my recommendation that we approve this resolution.
Okay, Chief, thank you. Okay, council, any comments, questions on this?
I had a couple of questions in regards to the rates and stuff that you have now. So those are just the effective ones coming up. And are they analyzed every single year, or they do it on a biannual, or how do they analyze it? How often do they?
Every single year, and then so you get the Medicaid, Medicare rates that come down on the federal side, and then
Okay.
they basically look at multiple different aspects to the stuff, to include fuel prices as well. So it anticipating to go up. Obviously, there again, it went up 80 cents last year. A potential go up even more this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Anything else? Any other comments? Okay, with that then, do I have a motion then to approve consideration of Resolution 22-3, a resolution of the Roy City Council that approves ambulance transportation rates and charges?
So moved?
Okay, thank you, Diane.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joe. This is a roll call vote. Brittany?
Councilmember Sophie Paul,
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scadden,
Yes.
Councilmember Joe Paul,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Approved. Thanks, Chief. Okay, good information. Okay, we do have a presentation. We've asked John Perry out of the Weber Basin Water District to go ahead and provide us some information about the Flip Your Strip program. So, John, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be here, about as excited as I can be to be in front of a city councilor, right? A little nerve-wracking, but I'm excited to be here and discuss the Flip Your Strip program. This is a program the district engaged in about 8 or 9 months ago, where we basically saw a need to start incentivizing beyond the programs that we already had in place in the form of, toilet rebates and smart controllers and educational classes and things, to start helping with residents to start removing turf and put water-wise landscapes in as it pertains to the park strip areas of lots. And so as we engaged in this program, we looked at the cost, we looked at some of the staff time that would be required to administer a program like this, we looked at the cost-benefit ratios and things, and decided that if we were going to engage in this program, which is a costly program, that we were going to ask our partnering agencies, our member agencies, our customer agencies to engage in that process in the form of adoption of water-wise landscape ordinances for their communities to be eligible to participate in the Flip Your Strip program. And so we've been engaging with multiple municipalities. We've got 4 that have currently adopted landscape ordinances, another 8 or so that are in the process of working through their ordinances and looking at kind of the requirements and some of the requests that we have as it relates to those ordinances to get those things adopted so they can have their communities also be eligible for this program. What this program looks like is essentially we offer $1.25 a square foot for the removal of turf in park strips and the replacement of that with water-wise landscaping. Now, we work with the communities to dictate and kind of define what that water-wise landscaping means. With my water-wise cap on and my water conservation, kind of emphasis, the district is willing to go down to essentially no vegetation but mulches. We don't want this to be hardscaped. We don't want it to be concrete and impervious to surfaces and things like that. But we go as minimal as no landscaping to as much as 40% plant canopy cover if that's what a community decides to do to be eligible for participation in this program. It is strictly for park strips right now. Like I said, we've been engaged in a lot of conservation programs for the last couple decades. This is our first kind of venture into these turf removal programs. We wanted to give staff time to kind of get comfortable with the process, make sure that we were going in the right direction before we enlarge this program, which we fully intend to do in the next several years to be more than just park strips.
I have a question. How come you're against concrete or hard substrates?
So there's issues with runoff. We like to see those park strips, work to actually retain some of the water that might be accumulated there. We also, want to have something that's sustainable and works well in the community. So it's just a general, item. We don't look for hardscapes in the park strip areas. There's also some concerns, a lot of times those are for utilities and things like that. And so we don't want to make that any more complicated to access those types of places either.
Hey, John, I'm just going to ask you, typically with a park strip, how much water conservation can one expect to see in terms of gallons of water saved?
Yeah, so on a typical park strip, you save anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 gallons. Now, obviously, a corner lot, depending on the size of the park strip, the width, and things like that, it can be a little bit higher, a little bit lower if you got somebody that was really paying attention. But I mean, the park strips really are kind of the low-hanging fruit. A lot of times, the irrigation systems are not designed to operate efficiently. You get the overspray. If you got snow being piled up on there, you got the salts and things like that that just make it a difficult place to keep grass green. It's not being used to kick a soccer ball or throw into sports and things like that. So it's just an area that makes a lot of sense.
So who decides what, does each individual household decide what they can put there, or do you have to come approve it, or is there a cap on how many residents can do this, or?
So we're obviously going to be limited by the budget we have available. So we've been doing this for about 9 months. We've paid out about $60,000 in rebates in the 4 communities that are participating right now. We have, another 100,000 or so that's in the queue. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of people that are participating in this program. We've got sufficient budget to meet the demand as it sits right now. As far as what goes back in, we want to work with the communities to make sure the ordinances, allow for, existing residents to participate in these programs. And then secondly, we want to make sure that the ordinances kind of envision and take into consideration what the community wants. So what we do is if a person wants to participate in this program, they go to Utah Water Savers, they sign up, we get their contact information, we send them the information that's pertinent to what they're doing, and require them to come and participate in a class where we go over kind of the irrigation conversion from overhead spray to drip irrigation. We give them access and a link to the ordinances that are on the book that might be applicable to them if they're in Roy or another community, and kind of guide them through what that process looks like. So if Roy, went through this process and adopted some ordinances, you could have, we want to see some vegetation in the park strip area and this is what we want it to be, or we don't care if there's nothing in there and this is what's going to be acceptable to us. And so we work with you guys to basically establish that.
And so you pay $1.25 a square foot. And so if, like, say, I'm interested and I want something nice in there, so if it goes over that, I just have to pay the difference then.
Correct. And I'll be completely upfront. $1.25 is not going to cover the entire cost.
Yeah.
Right. I've done this. I'm on a corner lot, and I'm probably into it. Do it yourself. I'm into it about $3,000 on my corner lot. And if I would have had this program, if I would have taken advantage of it, which I wouldn't, I probably would have got $1,200 is the rebate. And if you get a contractor on board, it's going to be much more than that. So I understand this is going to basically encourage people that are already looking to do it, maybe to take that final step and move forward. But even when you look at the $1.25 a square foot with that 7,000 to 10,000 gallons being saved, this is $20,000 to $40,000 an acre foot, which is one of the most costly conservation programs that we have.
What's the average rebate that you guys are actually at present?
$600 to $700.
6 to 7. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned that you are now taking basically choice away for anyone else that's coming up when you already promote some water-wise efficient grasses. You have your nice display up there, and 35%, may work fine, but may not. And so now we are, instead of allowing people a choice to say, okay, we're going to be metering these, we know that's coming up, let's allow you to find the grass you want, or use some of these other tools you've talked about, as opposed to now just mandating that they have no choice. That's a concern for me. And how does that truly, I know you said that was part of you being able to justify doing this, that you now limit everyone else, but maybe talk to me a little bit about how that justification comes in.
Sure.
And why we aren't going to just allow them, you got so much water, do what you want with it. See how you can work it out.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think you bring up several good points. So when you've got a metered secondary system, and if you go off of a water budget, you do have flexibility, right? If you want to define 3,000 gallons of water being available on a weekly basis and let them decide where to use it, you can absolutely do that. And I think we're talking about water budgets being assigned to different parcels that dictate kind of where they want to use the water and things like that. Absolutely acceptable. The 35% number that you're referencing, I'll just give you a little bit of background. That's not necessarily a district number. The state came out with a water conservation goal document a year or two ago that defined what we were going to be held to as far as what we need to get our GPCD down, our gallons per capita per day. Now, there's arguments about whether or not that's the best metric, but that's the metric that's out there, and that's the metric that we're being held to per legislation that passed this year that dictates we have to adopt those water conservation goals. When you dig into those water conservation goals, it has us going from 250, 260 GPCD down to 200 gallons per person per day by the year 2030, down to 184 by the year 2040, and 170 by the year 2060. Those are pretty aggressive reductions in water use, even with the utilization of meters. And when you look at the goal, the measures and the mitigation measures they identified in that document, they were very aggressive landscape modifications. So to the tune of existing landscapes having no more than 50% by the year 2060, and new homes being at 35% in our area. This isn't St. George, this is up in our neck of the woods to get down to that 170 number that they've got as the goal that we've got to basically work towards. And so it is aggressive, and it is a shift in behaviors, it's a shift in expectations. But I mean, those are kind of the numbers and where they come from. Now, we understand this is going to be a little bit of a process. That sheet right there that we've put out there, we're willing to talk about the 35%. We've worked with several other agencies, And some of them, we recognize the enforcement of it's going to be a little bit difficult. And then there are some concerns about those applications of it. And so we want to work with you guys, to see what we can get on the books to make sure that, new development is going to have to be held to a higher standard. It's not a matter of us not paying the electric bill and not having electricity. It's the water situation with the growth and kind of our changing climate, that's kind of dictating a longer growing season and more ET requirements for our plant materials. That means we're going to have to shift our behaviors. And so those are where some of those obligations come, or those requests come from, or those documents that are substantiating it. Once again, we're trying to incentivize the existing people to help get to that 50% number that was identified in that document, and just hold that threshold and that bar and that standard for new development to what the expectation is that's laid out by the state.
So I haven't had a chance to analyze how the recently adopted, amendments are compared to this, but I didn't see that it was exactly at 35% for all future, is that the case? Or maybe you can explain to us what those recently required amendments entail compared to your mandate.
Well, so I apologize. I'm not sure which one
Okay,
we're
so
referring to.
on your ordinance, it's, you're talking about not to exceed 15% total irrigated spaces, not to exceed 35% irrigated, and the state's got so much money on their amendments that the legislature just passed.
Oh, you're talking about Representative Spendlove's bill.
Right, and so I was just wondering how those are correlating for yours and versus what was just passed and how that's going to go.
So we do not know what the program requirements are going to be, how they're going to distribute those funds, what programs they're going to use to get that money out there regarding Representative Spendlove's bill. We've had conversations with the state about what their intent is. We got another meeting scheduled with them at the beginning of April to discuss what that process will be like. As we understand it right now, they do intend to use existing programs that are available. Now, those only existing programs are through the districts, right? The state is not running a turf incentive program. Weber Basin is, Jordan Valley is, Central Utah is, Washington County. The large conservation districts are running programs. And so, are they going to run it through programs like ours? Possibly. We don't know the answer to that yet. So we're all anxiously awaiting some feedback from the state as well. That being said, we are looking at these conservation goals, and when we have the conversations, we're going to be asking that there be some standard that needs to be adopted to have these monies be available to communities.
And when you talk about places that have the ability to use very drought-resistant grasses and turf and that sort of thing, are you just feeling that, Bermuda grass can kind of like thrive with no water in the sun. Normally we don't really like that, but it does really very nicely. We've plowed that up many times, right, in the orchard and all that sort of thing. So but for some people that's better to have at least some turf space. So why would that type of thing not be allowed, and you're now just limiting in a percentage when there are some other options available?
Yeah, and just so we're on the same page, so the limitations, the percentages that we're referring to are turf limitations, right? So it's not landscapes in general. Drip
Right.
irrigation is certainly prioritized in these ordinances. And I guess the long story short is when we're looking at conservation, I think we're trying to accomplish two things. We're trying to be efficient with the application of the waters that we have, right? So the utilization of drip irrigations, efficient design of irrigation overhead sprays and things like that, only watering when you need to. And we've got a strong education component that's doing all of that. And then the second component that I believe in is the reduction in just overall demands. And so I think it's a combination of those two aspects that result in the conservation numbers that we need to see moving forward. I'm not opposed, and I hope that we get some more, varieties of turf grasses and things like that that can thrive on significantly less water than we have. Even when we get into those situations, we are going to have a strong education outreach that we're going to have to do to make sure people aren't treating it like they have historic, Kentucky bluegrass and things like that. Now, that being said, if I had a crystal ball that said next year there's going to be a turf grass that comes out that only uses 10 inches of water, would that change our conversation? I think it absolutely would. But we've got to operate in the environment with the knowledge that we have right now.
Okay. Well, you bring up some interesting points, and I'm not so sure, Councilmember, if you've had to deal with that cotton-picking Bermuda grass, but it is terrible, okay? And I've used Roundup, okay, to solve my problems. So it's, and once it gets in, it's home.
It is.
And so I got a real passion about not trying to get involved with that kind of stuff. Let me just share, I sent the council some information for you to look at and consider. Let me just point to one bill. I gave you a bunch of bills, but this one I found to be really interesting. And John, just to echo some of the comments, and by the way, I do not believe there's any reason the governor will not sign all these bills. Randy was enlightening me a little about the process by which it takes to get bills signed, because I'm curious of why the governor hasn't signed a lot of them already. But let me just point to one. It's Senate Bill 110. Now, this is an interesting one because in this one, it specifically states that water will be part of the general plan. And so we have to direct then, and the date's kind of interesting. If you read it, it basically says we don't have to have this done until 2025, December 31st of 2025. So I need to put that preface out there. But listen to what they have to do. The Planning Commission has to basically propose in the general plan and make recommendations to City Council a water usage and preservation element that addresses the effective permanent development and patterns of development on water demand and water infrastructure. So we're looking at the future. Methods of reducing water demand per capita consumption of future developments, to your point. Methods of reducing water demand per capita consumption of existing developments. So it's not just what's coming in development, but has to come in and take about what the existing development, which is what Flip Your Strip is considering. The opportunities for the municipality to modify municipality operations to eliminate practices or conditions of wastewater. I mean, these are requirements. Now, here's the shalls. They have to have a regional water conservation goal recommended by the Division of Water Resources. So that's required under the law. They shall include a recommendation of water conservation policies to be determined by the municipality and landscaping options within the public streets for current and future development. So, Travis, we got to start talking about the plantations we have within our roundabouts, because we do have a lot of vegetation in there, okay? So it's going to put some issues on us. It does talk about lawn and turf at the parking strip level within the law. These are shalls. They're not mays. Shall says you have to develop a change in your general plan to make that happen. And it says shall review the municipality land use ordinances. So, Steve, this is a land use ordinance and include recommendations for changes in ordinance that promotes an efficient use of water. So for the first time, they're basically saying is where it had been an option in our general plan to discuss water conservation, this is saying it now becomes mandated. So our general plan has to include an element that talks about water conservation and how we're going to get reduction or limitation of use of lawn or turf. Let me read that. Shall consider principles of sustainable landscaping that includes the reduction or limitation of the use of lawn or turf. And then last, but I just want to carry a couple of things here, which is just really, really elimination or regulation on ponds, pools, and other features that promote unnecessary water evaporation. We've got ponds and pools. I've got a pond in my yard. And there's going to be some ordinances that's going to be expected out of this that's going to decide whether or not I can fill that thing, okay, or not, okay? Because I kind of like it. It's kind of cool. Anyway, I'm reading this stuff. It's coming. If the governor signs this bill, the bottom line's going to be we're going to see some changes. And here's the bottom line. That's what the Planning Commission has to do. Here's what it says the legislative body, you, as a city council, have to do. On or before December 31st, 2005, you have to then have a water use and preservation element in the general plan by law. Now, the question's going to be is, do we start that now? Or should we wait for the next city council to have to deal with the problem then? My concern, to be very blunt with you, is all the predictions, and I think I sent all of you some information that we just posted in the Deseret News. This state's got some serious water issues, and they're coming at us like a train. And we have got to figure out how we're going to deal with this issue. I'll be honest with you, John, when I read the announcement you put on the website that says we're looking at a 60% restriction, okay, on secondary water, when they were talking about delaying 30 days to turn the water on and then shutting it off 30 days, that's serious. And only 1 day a week? This is serious. I'm talking about some issues we're going to have to deal with, both at the municipality level, Travis, with our parks and open spaces, but definitely with our residents on how we're going to be able to deal with this. And here's what it comes down to. It comes down to whether we have drinking water or not. I mean, cut it where you want to cut it. The bottom line's going to be is it's going to come down. I'll be honest with you, John, I'm a fisherman, okay? You're going to mess with my fishing if you don't have the water.
Yep.
And man alive, that's going to be painful for a lot of us fishermen. But I surely want to make sure we have water to drink.
So
You
what
won't get
about-
that boat in the water without water.
Yeah, that's
What about,
the issue.
like my brother wanted me to ask, he has neighbors that use their culinary water. They don't have secondary water. So how are you going to monitor that? Are they going to be, because this is secondary water.
We'll have to.
Yeah,
We're
there's-
talking about mostly, so.
There's no restrictions currently in ordinance for culinary water.
Exactly. It's which now the conversation is going to be, and John, to the point, this one talks about water in general. We talk about secondary water because Roy City has a lot of that. But at the end of the day, can you imagine two neighbors? And we do have them. One neighbor on the right has secondary water. We just tighten the belt on that, and we don't do anything with the people who have culinary water watering their lawns.
Right.
That ain't going to go very well, okay? And trust me with this. They're going to take that hose off their house and they're going to water what they need to water, which defeats the whole purpose of looking at water conservation. So this is a serious issue, John. I think you brought some interesting points with this program to the table. I think at the end of the day, council is that we just have to ask this question. To make something like this to work, it's got to go to the Planning Commission. Do you want to basically, well, let me ask, any other questions for John relative to what he's proposed? Anything you want to share before I ask the council where we want to go with this?
Yes, I was wondering when you were talking about some flexibility, is that in regards to the ordinance requirements that you're talking about? You said you'd been working with cities and is that maybe that's something I can talk to you later about as well? But what kind of flexibility were you
Sure,
referring
the
to?
35% on the residential, on the single-family residential is where we have most of the dialogue right now. Now, to be clear, we want to get to that 35% number. The state's told us we got to get to the 35% number. I understand it's an uncomfortable number. It seems like a pretty big reduction. I would argue if you sit down and actually draw it out, 35% on an area that's actually going to be used is a decent amount of area. But I understand that's a big push, and so we have been at least engaging in dialogue to see what would work for the community to get this going.
Thank you.
But the 15% of commercial, industrial, institutional, I mean, outside of a designated recreation area, that's a pretty hard stand right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Some flexibility on the 35%. Thanks.
Thanks.
Other comments, question, council? So here's what it comes down to, and we just need to kind of where you want to go from here. How do you want to proceed? We can turn it over to the Planning Commission. We can direct Matt and Steve to simply say, Planning Commission, come back with some recommendations, okay?
Works for me.
And ultimately, the council has to approve an ordinance change. But at least you give them the time to go to public meetings, then they have the opportunity to have public input, look at all sides of this, because there's a lot of resources that may be available they can look at before they come back to a recommendation to the council. If you're okay with that approach, okay?
What's the other option?
There is no
Yeah,
option.
yeah, I don't
I
get
was waiting. You had me hanging on, on my.
I was like, I don't think
my
there's
seat.
another
I
option.
don't know, because
Well played,
to
Dan.
meet the requirement that John suggested requires a zoning ordinance change. Steve?
Well, from my end, if this is the route you want to go, at least give us, I say us, Planning Commission and I, some direction. I mean, if you just open it up for us to kind of decide what that number should be or how it should look, it may come in here and, 6 months from now, it'll get approved because it's been, thrown out and rewritten. So I'd rather have direction from you guys than just, me pulling it out of the hat. Okay, Planning Commission, do you agree, disagree, what numbers? And
Yeah, That's a good question. Council, I think to that extent, I think there's a recommendation that's provided by Weber Basin on this topic. They have come through and says, we'd like to see these kind of adjustments. So that's kind of in that path.
Sure.
But I think to the level that maybe Steve's talking about, if you think, and you've all had an opportunity to read some of that, Matt sent some of that information to you. If you think that's a good starting point, then I think the Planning Commission can basically take what you have read, that John has provided the city about 6 or 8 months ago, and then that's a start point. But if you think there's something in there you think, hey, I'm just not comfortable with that, and give Steve then a little more direction in terms of says, hey, I'd like to have this a little bit more flexibility on this part of it, then I think that's what Steve is asking. Because right now, at the end of the day, it's got to come in pretty close to what Weber Basin is saying their proposal needs to be in order for them to approve it. And it's got to be something compatible, we think, with the council that simply says we can support it. Otherwise, the Planning Commission will head down this one-way street, and at the end, we'll come up with something just not going to go and not going to work.
John, do you mind if I ask from a distance, when do you anticipate the meters will be in and that you'll be able to make the determinations of the allotments?
Well, so that would be a complete shift in the billing structure and contracts that we have on the books right now, right? So we would have to have new contracts executed for all of our customers to engage in a different billing process. As far as meters, 242, House Bill 242 passed, which means that we have to have them in by January 1, 2030.
And for you, is that something you anticipate or you've been already working towards? Because I'd heard you were already working towards it, and it might be sooner than that.
Yeah, so within Weber Basin's retail secondary system, right, we're a wholesaler of water as well as the operators of a retail secondary system. We've got about 23,000 connections total, and 12,500 of those are metered as of today.
12,500?
And then which of your municipalities in the surrounding area have actually signed on? Washington Terrace,
So
Clearfield?
Washington Terrace, Clearfield City, Layton, and Riverdale
Okay,
are the 4 that are on the books right now.
Yeah.
There's other cities considering it.
right.
Okay.
And what's your response to that? Like, what's the feedback from those other cities?
So we haven't had any negative comments back from any of them. We actually met with Clearfield City today about another program that we're going to be engaging in that kind of piggybacks off of this Flip Your Strip concept, and they're excited to be moving forward. They've had theirs on the books for, I don't know, 3-4 weeks at this point, and we've already seen quite a few applications come through in their municipality. So residents are excited, and it's from the staff level. We haven't gotten any feedback that anybody's had any issues with it so far.
Yeah, and remember, here's the key to this conversation really comes down to this. There would be a requirement to change some ordinances that we have, both in the Chapter 13, which deals with the downtown area for the most part, and then there would be requirements for the rest of the ordinance to deal with both commercial and residential. So it has to kind of look at across the city. But remember, that's the ordinance change to kind of move us to that. But whether or not an individual chooses to want to participate in the program is left up to them. There's no mandatory requirement.
I mean, from an ordinance change, I'll say this. I once had a boss, and he's still in the public sphere, say plagiarism is the highest form of flattery. Steve, you've got 4 municipalities that have adopted ordinances to bring this into play. Take the best of whatever they have to offer and bring it forth to us.
And we can provide you the links to those as well. So.
And I would like to check the flexibility of maybe not the 35% at this point in time, and I'd like to increase that because I believe if people have an allotment, and maybe they'll go to 35%, maybe that will be fine, but I think it's a little nicer for them to have a choice that they can mix and match the pieces that come together to use at limited resource that fits best for them and their lifestyle. Maybe they won't want any lawn, that's great, but you know, I just think that option should be available. It's better to allow people choice.
Okay.
Yeah, because on half of my strip, I have decorative blocks and then ground cover. So would I be allowed to do that on the whole front of get rid of my grass?
On
Or do you have to have
behind
permission, or could I just do it myself?
Sorry, are you talking behind the sidewalk or in the park strip?
In the park strip.
So in the park strip, that would be from Weber Basin's perspective, that would be an appropriate use of the Flip Your Strip program.
Okay.
Right.
Now, we would have to work with the city to make sure your ordinances also allow for that type of use, but from our perspective, it absolutely would.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? Okay, then I just need some direction from you in terms, John, thank you. Do we want to send this to the Planning Commission and have the Planning Commission go ahead, look at the input, get some ideas to us and bring it back to the council for consideration?
Yes, please.
Please.
Everybody okay with that? Okay, then let's take that as an action item, Matt, okay? The council believes that we'd like to at least see some options, and let's see what can come out of that. John, thank you. Appreciate that. Great.
Glenda?
It's important that we do this quickly, because if people are gonna start their strip, they're gonna wanna be doing it soon.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
like that the ordinance is moving.
If it takes 6 months to pass, it'll be winter.
Yeah,
So,
and,
yeah.
and timing is everything, and you got to work that into the planning schedule, but you're right. There is some people within Roy City who really would like to tap into this program if we can get it established. And as you heard, it wasn't talked in detail, but the legislators appropriated $5 million to look at these kind of programs within the state. So there's some money coming, and I think hopefully John and his team will work out some ideas of how much that will be directed to Weber Basin. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, next conversation is we're going to talk about seasonal part-time salary survey. Travis?
We're running through a few problems right now with our PowerPoint, sorry, laptop issues. We did, we actually tested it and tried to go above and beyond to figure it out, but, yeah, and we've given you all a copy of the slides that we would have went through in the packet that we handed you before, so if we don't get it up, please refer to them. Mayor and City Council, thank you for letting us come here tonight and pitch this presentation. Last July, the city addressed Public Works and Parks and Recreation full-time wages. On January 4th, we addressed administration and public safety wages. And we're here today to talk about one of the last piece of the puzzle, and that is our critical part-time staff. Our part-time staff is made up of, at various times of the year, up to 150 of Roy City's youth, and we need to talk tonight about fixing a problem we have there and go from there. Over the weekend, when you got your city council packet, we sent you our proposal and plan at that point in time. I hope you've had a chance to go over it. Mm-hmm. If not, we're about to right now. So, okay, some of the things we wanted to talk about, and we'll just jump to that one where it talks about why with recruitment. We need 90 people. We hope to get 90 people to work at the Aquatic Center. We currently have 5 applications.
90 applicants?
No, we need 90 positions filled.
90 positions.
And we
okay.
have 5 applications. 5. At this point, we can't open the Aquatic Center. Swimming lessons is a program that is very critical in the city. Not only does it promote water safety for our youth, it frankly speaking, generates revenue for the city and the recreation complex. We don't have enough people to teach our summer swimming lessons. So that's a big part of this. Adult officiating. Adult officiating, when I first started at Roy City 22 years ago, we would pay about $14 a game for an adult official. Currently, the going rate is anywhere from $27 to $65, depending on the game. That's per official. And then lastly speaking, there are hundreds of jobs anymore in this community at $10 an hour or more. The other key why we wanted to talk about was retention. You know, it's important for us to try to keep these kids for multiple years. You know, ideally you hire them when they're 15 and they work until they graduate. That is an ideal plan for us. And, you know, 15 years ago, that was fairly realistic. We've noticed over the last 5-6 years, it doesn't work that way anymore. We don't get them coming back year in and year out. A lot of reasons when we talk to them is because of pay. Uniform costs. If you'll notice in the pictures, you'll see a lot of pictures where, whether it be the recreation or lifeguards or things like that, that frankly speaking, you know, we try to look like a team. It's important for us to look like a team and to be identifiable in the public. And we spend a lot of money on that. Liability. You know, whether you're talking programming or whatever, one of the big pushes I noticed when the police and fire were talking about was the importance of keeping our communities safe. Well-trained lifeguards are critical in that. You know, I always feel that our lifeguard staff does not get enough credit for what they do. You know, everyone thinks it's this fun job that high school kids go do and sit in the sun and do things like that. If they don't do their jobs well, it comes at the ultimate cost. You know, so it is critical that we have well-trained staff. In the recreation department, we love sports. Sports is a $1 trillion industry because of the passion it brings. And sometimes, unfortunately, that passion is unleashed upon our 15, 16-year-old staff and site supervisors. And it's important that we can keep them around by showing them quality compensation. And lastly, we think it's going to help reduce overtime for our full-timers. You know, I can't tell you how many times, whether it be Lizzie or Jody or Anita or Julie, we got to have a body there. Got to be somebody to keep score. Got to be somebody to supervise a gym. Got to be somebody sitting in a lifeguard chair. And we're having full-time staff have to be able to do this. The other why we wanted to talk about, in the recreation department, 22 of our current 46 staff members have played for Roy City Recreation Sports. That's a good number. 70 to 75% of our overall part-time staff is made up of Roy residents. You know, I mean, we hire our own. We hire kids in our community. The picture you see is a kid by the name of Cash Coulihan. And the picture is Cash is an 8-year-old junior mite football player. And the second picture is Cash is a Roy Recreation employee. We take great pride in knowing that our department play a key role in youth's lives in our community. This is not only from programs we offer, but we feel the employment opportunity gives them a chance to learn a sense of community. We want to help the youth of this community grow life skills through their employment with Roy City. We talk all the time about we're the ones trying to teach these people how to work, the importance of coming to work, the importance of, if you can't come to work, finding replacements, the ramifications of them not coming to work and what they are. I mean, for the vast majority of our part-time staff, it's their first job. It really is. And you know, we spend a lot of time trying to say, well, you know, this is what it's like in the real world, coming out and getting jobs. The next slide, this is currently where we're at. This is us. This is what we pay. I'm not going to read it all to you. You guys have had a chance to look at it. But as you can see, you know, we start probably 75% of the workers off in the recreation department at that recreation worker one with $7.85 an hour. That's where they start, you know, and it's become a challenge to, like we talked about, recruit, keep, and get staff at that. Next one. This is the complex. It's fairly similar. Office staff, lifeguards, WSIs. You know, one of the things that I think is important to know, all our jobs require a certain amount of training. A lifeguard, it used to be, we no longer can afford to do this. Somebody would pay us $300 and they would come and take a lifeguard class from us. You know, a 27-hour long lifeguard class. And they would pay us $300 to do that. We don't do that anymore. We can't get staff if we ask them to pay that $300. So we charge them the minimum we can, which is the Red Cross fee. You know, that's all we do. It used to be an opportunity for us to create revenue. We can't do it anymore. Nobody will apply for jobs. You know, so we're asking these people who have to go to trainings and have to go to programs, you know, and wanting to pay them fairly minimal rates. Next slide. Aquatic Center, there's no difference. Same thing. They have to be educated. They have to go through lifeguard classes. They have office staff. You know, all these things are just a training, or excuse me, are our basic starting out wages. This is our current part-time wage budget within Roy City and all of our departments. As you can see, the recreation, 82,000, complex, 193, aquatic center, 206. What we did, this is, to be honest with you, we worked with HR on this. This is a little bit different than the full-time salary survey. And I'm gonna quickly explain the why to you on that. In full-time wages, everybody puts them into a computer, and it's a database that you can easily pull up and identify, you know, what their job title is. You can read their job description and what their rate is. Doesn't happen like that in part-timers. The other reason that we had to go a little bit unique here, every city's either doing that, either done this, or in the process of doing it right now. You know, we're all battling the same fight right now of we don't have help. And we can't run our programming, we can't open our facilities unless we get help. These are the cities we used. You know, and we're not the top paying. These positions and jobs we're talking about don't make us the highest paid city, and the ones we used, we're not the lowest either. You know, we're kind of in that midpoint where we have been for a lot of our jobs we've done for full-timers. This is an interesting slide, and we wanted to show it to you, and it's in the packet where you can specifically look at some of these wages that some of these businesses pay. This is where we're losing a lot of kids. You know, we're losing kids to, you can't drive down 1900, you can't drive down 3500 without seeing help wanted signs. You know, at a significantly higher rate than what we're talking about within our budgets and where we're currently at. This is our proposal. This is what we would like to see happen, and this is in the recreation department we'll talk about here. The recreation department, we would like to create 3 separate positions within our recreation specialist. The first one at $10 an hour is your basic scorekeeper. You know, somebody who, what they do is they come there and keep score, and it's a valuable thing. You have to have it. I mean, we're playing games, and I can assure you if we don't turn the score over in under 3 seconds, the crowd will let us know, you missed our score, that was 3. So it's an important position. Most of the staff we anticipate would be brought in at this second tier level of this recreation specialist 2. And recreation specialist 2 is the person who has the ability to scorekeep and officiate K through 3rd grade, whether that be flag football, basketball, anything in our T-ball family, coach pitch, those kind of sports like that. Recreation Specialist 3 at the $13 an hour rate, your scorekeepers, and they can officiate 4th through adult leagues. You heard me mention earlier that we're in a situation where there is a shortage of adult officials. Lizzie has had to do yeoman's work several times over the last few years to try to get games played. We have a friend in a neighboring community who literally canceled basketball games last week because he didn't have anyone to officiate them. I mean, they're canceling programming right now. Supervisor is a critical position in what we're talking about. They are kind of the site person there for coaches to talk to, angry residents, angry fans. They deal with everything that happens at a site, whether it be a gym or a field. And it's important that we have quality people. I mean, we've had to use at different times this year 17-year-old kids. And that, frankly speaking, that's not fair to them. You know, asking them to do what we're asking them to do at that point in time. But at our current rates, we cannot get qualified adults to do those jobs. The coordinator position, you'll see a slide here in a few minutes. The coordinator position is critical. We have a coordinator, and in my opinion, we have the best coordinator in the state. in recreation and an amazing coordinator at the complex and aquatic center. But we have one. You know, we have one, and there's a slide we'll go through here in a minute where you'll see how many other cities of like size of ours have. You know, and so we're proposing that we bring in 2 part-time coordinators. The complex is very similar. We're not going to go into as much detail there because we've kind of talked about the issue. The big ones there is the opportunity for kids to grow from a lifeguard 1 to a lifeguard 2, and that would be after a year of an employment, as well as passing a in-house first-year lifeguard exam with a bunch of checkoffs throughout the year and things like that. It also is for the WSI2. WSI is an acronym for Water Safety Instructor, aka Swimming Lesson Instructors, which is what the bulk of our staff is at the complex. You know, frankly speaking, is water safety instructors. And it also gives them an avenue to grow. One of the things we really like about these proposals is it also shows our staff a roadmap. It shows them a roadmap of how to advance in their careers, you know, what they have to do to get higher up in the food chain. Aquatic center, very similar. You know, I mean, a lot of them are very similar in how we do these things. Let's get to the brass tacks of it, I guess. Our FY22 budget is, in the recreation department, is $82,000. What we will be asking here tonight is the opportunity to raise our fees, or excuse me, to raise our wages to that higher level. We need to do it soon. And these 3 divisions we're discussing right now, we can't wait till July 1st. We won't survive. You know, there are other part-time positions you're going to see about in the budget that opens in FY23. Police have some, fire have some. We have some others in parks and public works that aren't even addressed in this right now. They felt more comfortable with their ability to wait to July 1. We can't. I'm just going to tell you that right now, we can't. So those numbers are what the FY23 budget would be, and then what we're asking for the difference to get from April 1st to the end of June. That's what those numbers represent. Next slide. Also in there, we wanted to get a little creative, and we wanted to entice our staff to stick around and to finish out seasons and to get them to pick up extra shifts. And when Anita and Lizzie call them up and say, hey, I need somebody to work, this is an incentive for them to do it. And what it is in a nutshell, and they're all different, and I can explain the why they're all different as we go through this. At the recreation, we're asking them to work 50 hours per quarter with 0 no-calls or no-shows. Complex, 140 hours per quarter with 0 no-calls or no-shows. Aquatic center, 28 shifts in a 7-week period with 0 no-calls and no-shows. We didn't just pick these numbers. Go ahead, next one. We didn't just pick these numbers kind of randomly or anything like that. What they're built on and what the idea behind it is we went through each quarter and how many hours staff works and who hits certain goals. And we wanted to make it something that was attainable, but not just given. And you can see in here, in the first quarter in the recreation department, we had 27 staff members. 37 of them would have reached the bonus. You know, at the complex, you're at 35 staff members, 40% would have reached the bonus. So it's not like we tried to do it in a way that you know, just made it, hey, you show up and we're going to hand you a check. We didn't want to do that. That's not right. The total bonus payouts for the 3 things is the $6,000 at the recreation, the $7,000 at the complex, and the $9,000 at the aquatic center. We picked those numbers based on a 50% pass rate. Obviously, if we would have said 100% of the people are going to get it, or mathematically, it's probably not even possible for 100% of the people to get it. You know, there more than likely isn't that much hours to give around. The amount of the bonus, so we're on the same page, is $108.28. And the reason for that is once you take taxes and things out like that, it rounds up to a nice crisp $100. So now, I guess we're saying, moving forward, that in the FY23 budget, if this is an opportunity to get done tonight, there's our totals in the menacing yellow. That was a joke only Lizzie Badger got, because I sat in a room with her and she said that yellow is way too menacing. There it is. There it is. And I cannot begin to explain the challenges this is going to bring. As you can see, all three of these divisions have different challenges. There's different issues for all of them. If this is approved by you guys tonight, if we can get a head nod of something like this moving forward, we'll start advertising for these positions tomorrow. We need to. You know, I mean, we don't really have another option. We're kind of at a tipping point. We're kind of at a tipping point, to be brutally honest with you. You know, Lizzie, Jody, Julie, Anita, they love their part-time staff. I see how they interact with them. I see them bring them treats. I see them develop a very maternal figure, a very supervisor figure. They're teaching these kids how to be better human beings. It is critical, in our opinion, that this be addressed. So, next thing is questions from you guys.
Here's what I see, if you don't mind. Just to get us to, from now until 1 July, you're looking about $45,000. And then going into next year, the total looks like for fiscal year 23 for all this is $244,000. Is those kind of the rough numbers you're calculating to?
Yes, sir.
So those are the numbers, council. I guess the question is, just so we understand the framework, this is not an approval. This is a discussion. The approval then would be based on your recommendation to proceed. Matt would then formulate through the finance people, come in with a budget adjustment, and that budget adjustment then would come back as a formal request if you approve it, okay, more than likely in the next city council meeting. But as Travis suggested, if you give a head nod, this seems to be reasonable, and you're willing to support it, he can start now going out and get the advertisement going with the anticipation that this will happen in the next city council meeting. But it's up to you. So questions, comments for Travis?
Well, I played Roy Rec my whole life, and my grandkids have played. It's a no-brainer. We got to pay these kids, and we have to keep them here and keep them coming back. I mean, can make more at Arby's and In-N-Out and $14, $15, $17 an hour there. And I like the Roy kids coming, you know, because then if they make a bad call, I know them and I can yell at them. And so I just, we don't want them going to other cities. And we've got to keep them here in Roy, and we got to keep the rec program going. And like you said, there's signs everywhere, starting $14, $15 an hour. And I mean, I just think that it's just something that we have to do. Right. So I support it fully.
Even with the proposed rate changes, it really appears substantially lower than commercial going rates anyway. So
Correct.
do you think it's still going to be sufficient to achieve the goal you're looking for?
I sure hope. You know, and I've talked about whether to say this or not. I hope it fixes it. I really do. I don't have any promises. I can assure you this, though: if we do nothing, we have no chance to try to fix it.
The option is close the programs.
Programs, facilities,
Right.
you know, it's just catastrophic.
And the bonus incentive, I think, is good. I mean, my grandson worked at the aquatic center last year, and I think he missed like 3 days. He would have loved to have a bonus at the end. But it just has to be done.
Can they do a bonus to where it's like this is this year bonus, and then if you miss one day, then it's this bonus,
A
to where
scaled down,
kids
yeah.
still have an incentive, but not, things come up.
You know,
There's stuff that goes around.
The truth is, we understand kids are going to miss work. Somebody's going to get sick, and,
Right.
and somebody's going to something's going to get thrown on them. This time of year, it could be I'm on the baseball team, and I told you I could work, and we got a rain out, and now I have a game.
Right.
We ask them to do it the right way. You know that they know who to call. We have programs right to or when to work and things like that. That all these kids have apps on their phone and the
Right.
ability to try to find their replacement.
Correct, and it's based on a no call, no show.
Correct.
So as long as they get somebody to backfill their shift, that's fine.
Okay, that makes more sense.
yes,
Yeah, it's a no call, no show.
Correct.
Don't do anything about it, just don't show up.
Right.
But there's steps you can do.
Correct.
Okay.
We've in all of three of these departments, there are very good avenues for staff to find replacement workers.
Okay. Other thoughts, council?
So where does this money come from?
Matthew.
Okay, take a shot at that one, Matt.
The tree in the backyard.
So we do have fund balance for this year, but the next year money will have to go into every other thing that we're looking at.
Yeah.
So we're really starting the budget process now. Amber just got the numbers from the department heads, so we don't even know where we're.
And that's the thing is this here should only be in context of what is from an
$42,000
judgment.
not-
Yeah, between now and July 1.
Right.
And then we go through and assess in the
Yeah.
work sessions and all
And that's
that.
about 45,000.
45,000 plus bonus. Well, and then the bonuses are going to come into next fiscal year.
Both the salary increase, because you'll set the salary increases going into the next fiscal year, and the bonuses next year, and that's 244,000. So what he's asking for would be is, will you give me $43,000 to carry out the rest of
Rest of
this
the year,
year?
mhm.
But going in July 1st, we'll need to talk about appropriating $244,000 to carry it through the whole next year.
Right.
So we could do the head nod for this year, budget adjustment for this year, and then let the rest flow into
the work sessions.
the work session.
And
for
it
the budget.
should,
Yeah,
because
agreed.
ultimately, they're going to have to present something to you, but he's giving you kind of a heads up of what's coming.
Yes, sir.
The only challenge is going to be is, if you set those salary rates,
And then you don't continue
and
it.
then you don't continue, and then those people want
Here's your
July,
raise, but we want it back.
Yeah, well,
$15 an hour,
July
now you're getting 12, and so you want to make sure that what's agreed to is carried through. And that's really what he's asking for, is that once we set this in motion, it stays in motion.
Correct, and that's where we wanted to be transparent with that whole process and say, this is what we need now, but we don't want to snow you. This is what we're going to need for FY23.
Right. Any other comments, questions, council? Okay, this is not a decision point, but a discussion point. I just need to know from you a way to proceed. So should we go ahead and have him then generate a budget adjustment document to bring back to the city council?
for this fiscal year.
For this
yes.
fiscal year, because that's what will be affected.
Yes.
You okay with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Diane, okay?
Is this
Okay.
the head nod? This is
Okay,
the
I
head
think
nod
you got it,
portion.
okay?
Outstanding.
Matt,
Thank
if
you
you
all
go
very
ahead
much.
and have Amber work that up.
Can I
Perfect.
ask a question, Travis, before you go down? I was just wondering, on the certified officials, when you're talking about the $27 to $65 that it takes for official per game, so how is that determined?
Okay, that's a great question. And let me say this first, that we pay them out of a whole separate of account we have. And it depends on the program, whether it be football. We're tied in with football with a group called the Wasatch Front Football League, and they set the rates. You know, and it's a little bit tiered. If you're a high school varsity official, you make a certain rate. If you're not an official, you make a little bit below that. Basketball, we use a gentleman by the name of Mark Sackett, who's an arbiter. And what we do is we send him our schedule, and he tries really hard to get us refs. Sorry, I have way too many inside jokes with just Lizzie right now. It's not really good to play the room that way. And they set the rates there, and it's kind of the going rates surrounding us. You know, that's what Layton pays, and that's what Syracuse pays, and you know, if we don't pay that, we won't get those adult officials. So that's kind of the process
Okay.
we go through there.
And then when you were talking about the proposed starting wage, before you talked about the ranges, but this just has a starting wage. So I was just wondering, how are you determining your range and that sort of thing?
Okay, it's another good question. Some of it will happen through the interview process based on what they can do at that point in time. And if somebody has the ability to come in and keep score or officiate K through 3, they would start at that rec specialist 2. If we have a past lifeguard who applies down at the aquatic center who maybe worked for us last summer, they would have to take the test and then be eligible to be a lifeguard 2 at that point in time. Same with the WSI 2s at the complex.
So what you're saying is that the starting wages that you mentioned on like page 10 would then be, you would just take that over and decide if they fit those new classifications that you're having, or is there wiggle room? Like it's really is 10 to 12 or 10 to 15 or?
What it would be, let's just take the recreation department for example.
Okay.
Like I say, they would come in and sit in an interview with Lizzie, and she would ask them a series of questions, that she has on there, find out if they have the ability to be, let's just say, a scorekeeper official K through 3rd grade. She's going to start them at that $11 figure. If they say, no, I don't have the ability to officiate right now, I'd like to learn, it's something I'd like to maybe do in the future, but right now all I can give you is a scorekeeper. They would start at that $10
Okay.
an hour range.
Okay, makes sense. Last comment, we'll let you go, Travis. I still believe that Roy has the best parks, in northern Utah. They're just incredible. And I can't help to think that, to be honest with you, we probably service a whole lot more people other than Roy residents. I think when we bring people to the game, they're coming from everywhere. I think ASO is a good example. These teams are developed and they're established. Do you track any of that kind of data that talks about how many of all the sports programs that are basically those who are Roy residents and those who are outside of Roy that we're providing support to?
I can tell you in the recreation program, Lizzie could tell you where every single person lives. And things like that. Last year we started at the aquatic center. We asked people, do you live in Roy? And so we have those numbers for that.
Okay.
We also help with other programming. And when I say other programming, let's say, for example, competitive soccer. Mm-hmm. Competitive soccer plays games at Roy West Park in Roy City. Mm-hmm. We don't track how many Roy residents they have. We contract with a group called the Rampage, Roy Rampage, and we make them pay a field rental fee. Mm-hmm. But to be honest with you, I can't tell you the percentage of their team that is Roy residents and or their opponent. I'm sorry, I can't tell you that.
And that's okay. It was more off the cuff, but let me share with you a reason for my question. Riverdale's got an interesting program, okay? And you have to appreciate the program. I remember seeing a flyer from Riverdale, and they says, if you basically would like to swim at Roy City's Aquatic Center, come on into the office, okay, because they buy a bunch of tickets,
Sure.
and you can buy it at half price, which means Riverdale pays all the expenses, okay? They buy the tickets in bulk, I assume that's how they're doing it, and they sell it to the residents at half price. Now, that's an interesting idea.
Build a swimming pool.
That's okay.
I'm
That's
just
okay.
going to correct you on one thing there. The only mistake that I think you made is they do that at the complex.
They do it at Complex too?
They do it at the complex.
Okay.
From my understanding, what they do at the aquatic center, and you're right, they rent out, Julie, how many? 10 nights
Okay,
throughout
so
the
they're on
summer.
the 10-night roll. Okay.
They rent out 10 nights. I will tell you that the first I've heard of them charging their residents to get in was right there. I've
Half
never
price.
heard
Half
that
price.
they charge them a ticket to get in until you just said it.
Yeah, they just have to show up to the city. There's a pamphlet they have. It's really quite an attractive pamphlet. And it's a great deal for Riverdale residents to take advantage of Roy City facilities. I'm not saying that's not such a bad idea, but you can't have the class of services that you provide in Roy City and not have a whole lot of people take advantage of them.
Well,
That's a good thing. maybe we can have a debate about whether or not we're charging outside of Roy City residents maybe the right fee. That's another conversation. But just to share the point with you is that you can't deny that Roy City doesn't have some great facilities, and a lot of people know it outside of this city.
And I think what you're confusing is the program where a Riverdale resident will get a 50% off of an annual complex, Roy Complex.
Yeah, their
membership.
brochure basically said, because I was a little confused with that part of it, but it specifically said, it said the aquatic center.
Really?
And it may have also said because I picked up on that, and I said, wow, that's kind of interesting. But if they're renting out the complex at night for 10 nights, and they invite everybody from Riverdale that wants to come, that's not a bad deal either.
No, and I just want to say one thing. I do agree with you. I think we do have wonderful facilities.
Sure.
Parks guys work diligently to try to make our facilities as nice as possible. The recreation crew on fields do a wonderful job. You know, we are blessed with great facilities and great staff that take care of them.
Yeah.
I know that I go to the aquatic center. Just don't ever come when I'm there. I don't want to see me in a swimsuit. But anyway, my grandkids love it, and I swear, we always sit and make friends. Some of them sitting by. I can't believe how many people come from far away to come to our aquatic center, and it's just a very popular place. And I bet you those Riverdale people that come, I bet their kids see it, and I bet you they're back 2 or 3 times that summer because they had so much fun that evening. So it is just a wonderful place to hang out. And I have my daughter's friends that come from all surrounding cities. They don't like the one in North Ogden. They come to Roy, and they live in North Ogden and Pleasant View. They said Roy's the best. So I bet if you did, I don't know how you would ever figure it out, but I bet close to half the people that come on a daily basis don't even live in Roy.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I think
Sure.
what it does, it brings in context in terms of just recognizes how successful they are and how the demand is. My only concern would be and this is the hardest part, Matt, Travis, is I just want to make sure that we do our best not to burden the Roy resident, okay, on carrying the cost as much as possible. Hard to figure. We can surely charge a non-resident versus a resident rate. I mean, that's surely something there, but just recognize that we need to do everything we can to ensure that the Roy residents, the Roy taxpayers are not burdened, okay, because of the great success we're finding in our programs. And I know that's a hard line to find, but it's something maybe we still need to consider and look at, okay?
Fair enough.
Anyway, anybody else? Any other comments? Okay, Travis, thank you. We appreciate that. Matt, we got some direction on that one, so we'll move forward with that. Travis, you're up for the vision of exerscaping.
Okay.
Cities and parks. You got some charts on this?
We're kind of on a. Is it working? We're kind of on a little bit of our draft version of this, but what you have in front of you would have been Lizzie's computer died. We're literally on a borrowed computer trying to figure this all
Gotta
out.
increase the budget for a computer now, too?
The keyboard died, like it just.
That's
really
IT.
charged.
It's IT. I think it's because she.
As much as she means to, you better get her a computer.
I'll get 2.
She's your brains and
She's remarkable. There's no doubt about that. It's funny in the Flip the Strip program that we happen to be on the same night because, I talked earlier about us being at a tipping point in Parks and Recreation and some things like that. We're kind of getting there with water if we already haven't reached it. And I'm just going to say this right now. Councilman Scadden mentioned earlier plagiarism. I have plagiarized a ton in this, including from Kevin Homer, Glenda Moore. You're going to see their handiwork over a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. And I appreciate them for it. It's wonderful information and things like that. Here's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about snowpack levels. What is Xeriscape? We were tasked when this first began to identify green space that would be able to be used for Xeriscape. We identified them these ways: parks, buildings, we call them small areas. It doesn't necessarily mean they're small. It just means they're not parks. We're going to talk a little bit about cost, and we're going to talk about proposed area, and then we're going to have just a kind of a general conversation at the end of this meeting about watering as a whole in this summer and some things that I want you guys to be thinking about moving forward. We pulled this off at KSL yesterday at 10 a.m. This is currently where we're at. You know, this is where we're at, and we're in the yellow. And the irony is, 2 weeks ago we were in the 70%. We've had a couple of decent weeks in a row to get us back to a decent number. The one thing that we've learned talking with Roy Secondary Water and some others, it's still a moving target. You know, I mean, where we're at watering wise this year is still a moving target. And, you know, fingers crossed we get some really good storms for a while and we can get that number higher. But it's been this way for several years. I mean, Utah is one of the driest states in the nation. And that's not unlikely to change, in my opinion. So, you know, it's important we kind of go through this process. Mayor, I didn't mention you on people that I plagiarized, but this one I took right from your past one. Is it plagiarism if I give you credit after the fact? Definition of xeriscape is the practice of designing landscapes to reduce or eliminate the need for irrigation. Okay, vegetation that thrives with a little or added irrigation is called drought tolerant vegetation. You know, a lot of, and as we'll study this, a lot of things they'll talk about is native plants, native grasses, as Councilman Wilson was talking about earlier. Stuff that you have to give initial water to get established, but hopefully after that point you can really reduce the amount of water you put on it to get it to grow. These here are the parks. You know, we're going to kind of go through the parks. The areas in the yellow, and if it's easier for you to follow on the presentation packet we put in front of you, feel free. The areas in yellow are areas we identified as areas that would be eligible for xeriscape. Our parks, one of the unique things about our parks, for the most part, they're there to be used. We use them for events. I mean, we use them for programming, whether it be, you know, our baseball, flag football, all of the above, other programming in the community, soccer, lacrosse. Our parks are designed for programming, you know, so a lot of these, there's not probably as much as we had hoped. That being said, at Emma Russell alone, there's over 205,891 square feet of area that you could turn into xeriscape. Next part.
So let me just ask, so the numbers you've shown on these charts that we have are the numbers where you think you can xeriscape or exerscape and provide some relative saving to water consumption by these numbers we're looking at?
That's the areas we identified, and yes, that would be the number. Next park's George Wallen. One of the things you'll notice in a lot of them, back to the Flip Your Strip program, you're going to see about every park strip there. You know, park strips is I'm not going to echo what he said, but they're not awesome for water. You know, we use on ours typically MP rotor systems, and you get a little wind and you find yourself watering a lot of asphalt and cement and things like that. They are a little bit of a challenge to maintain. We like functional green space. We like green space that we can play ball on. We like green space that you can have a picnic on. We like green space that you can play with your kids on. Not really what park strips are, you know. And so those are the areas we identified at George Wallen Park. Roy West, you know, you guys can kind of see them. We don't necessarily, I'm not going to just point everything out. You guys have it in front of you. Go ahead. Municipal Park, you know, that's one that, you know, there's a lot of area there to, you know, make xeriscape or zeroscape in that case. Go ahead. McCall Fields, that literally is all park strip. You know, I mean, all you're seeing there is park strip because the rest of it is soccer fields. Fox Glen, same thing.
So when you're talking, can I
Please.
make a comment? So when you're talking the xeriscape, so are you talking rocks type thing? I don't want to see our Parks and Rec having to go around and clean up rocks first.
And it's a great question. It really is, and we're gonna get into it a little bit
Okay.
more.
Then go ahead.
Of things like that, but go ahead, Lizzie. Meadow Creek Pond, you know, you see what's there. This building, you know, this building, and in theory, we could have added the space right out here out front. We could have used it too. You know, it's entirely possible. I will tell you the reason we didn't. Christmas lights.
Hey, yeah,
Are we eligible for Flip Your Strip money as a
Great question
municipality?
that I wish I knew the answer.
you
I
got the-
knew last time we heard the presentation, we were not.
Are you shaking your head yes, John?
Hey, there you go.
There you go. I just got you with, anyway, all right.
Okay. Next one, Lizzie. This is our building. It's a little bit of older picture. You know, there's our shop out there to what would be the top of it. A lot of that area, the reason it's not is because it's going to be hopefully asphalt and parking lot and things like that. Public Works admin, Public Works shop, aquatic center, complex, 4,000 detention basin, airport road, cemetery, dog park, Harmon's, Riverdale Road sign, 2700 West. It's funny you mentioned earlier roundabouts. We've done a little bit of research, and you can see the areas that we've identified in red right there is areas that we currently have vegetation in. You know, we have some shrubs and we have some trees and we have some different things in there. And we're requesting this year in the FY23 budget money to cement it all in. You know, it's Steve doesn't like it, but it's an area you use a lot of water. I want you to think of how hot asphalt gets, and those areas get. It's dangerous for my guys. I don't love sending them out there to clean it and maintain it. For that concern, for the amount of water we use there, that would be an area that we're going to ask for money in our FY23 budget to cement in. So you know, we drove by Clinton, we drove by Syracuse, we drove by Riverdale. All of their little pieces right there are cemented in. The middle part, everybody has decorations in, and we haven't asked to remove that. But the parts, the little wings, are the ones that we're talking about. Okay. We talk costs. These are contractor prices. It's important you know that. This is a contractor's price. Some of these projects, because of the smaller ones, we have the ability to do in-house. We're looking to do several of these in-house, which would greatly reduce expenses. But a contractor's cost, we talked to 3 different contractors. They told us to think anywhere from $7 to $10 a square foot.
That's just for their labor.
That's really for the completion. That would be for about everything, you know. So, but I mean, if you took them at that, $10 figure, you know, and I'm not saying that that's who we would pick or who would get it, but that puts Emma Russell at a $2 million project.
Right.
You know, I mean, so these numbers can be staggering if you're going through contractors. I kind of gave you the contractors' prices for trees and shrubs and irrigation. Irrigation's kind of a moving target. You're dealing with how much pressure you have, what kind of system you're going to put in. I mean, it's a little bit of a moving target, how much you can retrofit. You know, usually you're going to have to cut, most of our parks are PVC pipe. So we'd have to cut it and put in poly pipe because there's no point in doing it if you're broadcast spraying. You know, the idea behind it's usually use bubblers. is drip systems and things like that. And, you know, we right now, well, we'll go on. Rock is $5.50 a square foot, landscaping fabric, $1 a square foot. It can be pricey. You know, I do want you to understand that. So next one, please, Lizzie. Proposed areas that we would like to do. Okay, and I'm going to tell you the why on these. First one would be, the first one I'm going to start right to left, would be the Parks and Recreation building. We think it's important moving forward that any new project we do, we take a very serious look at xeriscaping it and to make it part of what we do moving forward with any sort of projects. You know, we don't have a budget for it, you know, so it's either we ask for money in the budget session for it or we adopt some form of a xeriscape program and piggyback and tie them in together. The Harmon sign, frankly speaking, it's not very good soil up there. It doesn't match what Harmon's has done up there. They've kind of had a xeriscape design that they've got running through there, and then it kind of runs to our rocks and things like that. There's featured monuments in it. You know, I mean, obviously there's the current waterfall with the plants in it. We have 9 trees, 9 or 10 trees there that we would obviously keep in place and things like that, but add some rock through that grass area, decorative things in that place. The next one would be Riverdale Road for very similar reasons. You know, it's got a features thing with a sign, and it's got some things along there. It's got existing trees in there. It's one of those things that we would like, you know, I guess let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Kind of what we would like to see as a plan moving forward. I don't anticipate us having the budget to attack all of these things. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's financially prudent. In the same breath, I think it's important we come up with a concept. You know, our livelihood's on water. You know, our ability, whether it be a swimming pool or ability to water a field, to create green space, we need water. And if we can help in certain aspects to save and conserve water, we're willing. So what, in a nutshell, we would like to do is request monies every year in our budget. You know, anywhere from, say, $50,000 to $150,000, working with finance, knowing where we're at as a city at that point in time. And we identify these areas yearly, and we begin the process as xeriscape. Education. I think education is critical. Not just for us, it ties into what both Kevin said and Glenda said in past comments or in emails that they've sent us. People understanding that what to do and how to do it, you know, and Glenda about a year ago actually sent us a Waterwise Landscaping in Roy, Utah kind of a letter email to a bunch of us. I think there's a ton of great information on there. There's information on how to do it for residents, if they want to do it in their yard, things like that. And I would recommend we would put it on the city website, let the community see it. Kevin Homer mentioned one time in a public comment the importance of Roy City showing the way and kind of leading in this process. I don't disagree with that. You know, I don't. And I love green space. I'm a guy that I see green space and let's go play catch or let's play football. I love Kentucky blue, but I'm not naive enough to think that we can live in a world where that's all we have anymore. Next thing that I do want to talk about, and I just want us to think about a little bit. Last year, we got a little bit more leeway, and we got it from Roy City Secondary Water to water our sporting fields a little bit more. That's a liability issue, you know, and we'll work with them to see where we're at there to make sure that we can keep our sporting fields safe. Splash pad, and once again, I'm not looking for direction or anything tonight, but it is probably really important we start thinking about that. If we're going to ask residents to potentially only be able to water 1 to 2 days a week, I don't know that it is prudent on our part to run a recreational water splash pad 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And like I say, this is just one to put in the back of your mind, and we'll come back at a later point to say, where do we want to go with this? But talking with other cities, talking with other communities, we're all having similar conversations. You know, are we going to open this? Are we going to open it fewer hours? Are we going to open it fewer hours and fewer days? Or are we not going to open it at all? And those are things I think we need to talk about. Expectations. You know, I'm a big believer and a big fan of trying to make sure that we hit some expectations. And some of our expectations for this, and full disclosure, are very xeriscapey. You know, they're going to be plants and native grasses and bushes and things like that. Some of them are very xeroscapey, you know, where it is more rock and capping sprinkler heads. You know, and obviously doing that saves money significantly. You know, it's not as pretty. There's no doubt it's not as pretty. I think it would be easier on staff. There's always a debate. What's easier from a maintenance perspective? You know, is it easier to put a guy on a lawnmower and have him go across a park strip, or to pull weeds or spray for weeds and things like that? If you stay on top of it, they're about the same. But if you don't, it's obviously going to be significantly harder to pull weeds than it is to mow them. I have all the confidence in the world in our staff that we're going to be able to do something, and do something of quality, though, for the projects we have. So everyone is on the same page. I talked earlier about the three places we would like to see.
Can you go back to that? So correct me if I'm wrong, in the far, like the long strip there, the east side of the Parks and Rec building, that's already all torn up. It's all like dirt right now because
Correct.
you're building the...
Correct. And frankly speaking, that sprinkling system and everything, by the time the library had moved out and we had came in, there was so much damage to the turf up there, we couldn't even save it. You know, the other thing, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about with expectations. Mayor, you were kind enough to talk about how great our parks are, and I agree with you. I do. That being said, we're heading into the most challenging year we've ever had. The best way to keep weeds out of healthy grass is healthy grass. And our inability to water as much as we would have liked last year, our inability to water as much as we would like this year, stuff's not going to be up to what our standards typically are. And maybe that's the reality, is there's a new standard. You know, doesn't mean my guys aren't going to bust their butt to make it look great, because they are prideful and committed, and they're going to. And we've spoken about ways, okay, what are ways we can keep this green and pretty with a little water? And you're going to see us aerating more. You're going to see, you know, fertilizing, spraying. Those are the things we're going to have to do to keep our green space to where we want it to be. But it's going to be a challenge. I don't know that we're going to be able to keep it the way it's been for the last 20 years. You know, at least this year anyway, is what I'm saying with that. Yeah, these areas right here, they're ideal for a lot of reasons. And the reasons I talked about with the Parks and Recreation building, it's raw land. And frankly speaking, it's going to look unfinished and terrible if we don't do something. So if we didn't do this, we would just request it to do it in the budget anyway, frankly speaking. You know, the Harmon sign, the Riverdale Road signs, you know, like you said, we like the idea that they have a featured thing, you know, and that they have existing plants or trees in them right now. And we think by doing that, we can help keep the cost down on them a little bit. So these three total, right around $130,000. We
Glad
think
you're doing the one on 4,800, because that people see that one the most. And then the Harmons, for sure. because I've been wondering what you were gonna do in front of the Parks and Rec building for a long time. And so then Matt told me he told me what your plan was.
We actually, you may get a next city council meeting when we open up the budget, you might see some money in there for us to get started right now on some things.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I've always had a concern with, and I'm sure you do too, our green space football fields or soccer fields, they've got to be basically usable so we don't create injury, okay, to our players. And so there is going to be an expectation on the part of the city to keep them to a level of usefulness that you need to. Those areas that you've identified that are not going to be play fields, okay, where people are necessarily going to walk, I think you've offered some options. But when I see one piece of property in M. Russell, just doing a small calculation, where much like you showed in your M. Russell, and you don't have to go back to it, we can literally save 500,000 gallons of water on a small piece of property on that thing that never gets used. 500,000 gallons on one park, and that's just one side of a park, that's significant. And if you can do that, and we can work a program together and do that through all of our areas that are public spaces, we're going to make a significant dent, in my opinion, okay, to be very water conscious and do the right things. But more importantly, as Kevin would have said, okay, we're sending a clear message that if we're going to hold expectations to our residents, and we will, whether we have to create council a new ordinance that deals with culinary or what our secondary water supplier does in terms of providing some restrictions, Roy City is not exempt. We're going to lead the way. And we're going to tell people that says, yeah, Roy City is also going to take a water conservation strategy and work to find ways by which we can also help, okay, in this effort. We have to do that. Otherwise, they'll be pointing fingers at us and says, you're going to do it to me and you're not doing it to yourself. We can't let that happen. We need to lead in this. So we're gonna make that work. So great information. I don't know if I didn't take the time to calculate how many square feet of opportunity here, but John, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing that somewhere around maybe 1,000 square feet of, maybe I'm speaking too much there. I'm thinking of a 5-foot by maybe a 30-foot. So you're probably talking about 1,500 square feet of lawn consumes 7,000 gallons a year. That's a lot of stuff on that little piece of land. And think of what you can do when you're dealing with the hundreds of thousands of no longer requiring the lawn, and we can save that. I think personally, the water saving is staggering. And I think that's what we have to do. It may take us a few years to get there, as you're suggesting, Travis. Perfect. This is the plan in motion. But I think we can really go ahead and move in the right direction for both water conservation, but more importantly about what we want to do to make this area much better for us. Because say what you will, think what you might. We can draw energy from places across the world. I mean, literally, we can put solar panels up. We can run the sewer lines, okay, all the way to the Great Salt Lake, and we can purify those. We can do so many great things, but what we don't do well is we don't create water. Either we have it or we don't have it. And if we don't have it, then we're bussing it in. And I will tell you, my opinion, the growth of the Wasatch Front, okay, of what's being projected, if there is one stumbling block to meet those requirements, it's going to be the availability of water. And to be honest with you, the last few years, we've not been doing very well in terms of the climate. It's just not going in the right direction. Now, last comment on this. There has always been talk that says, well, we'll tap water out of the Bear River. There's a conversation you heard recently. If you haven't, then you need to hear it. We got to do something so we don't dry up the Great Salt Lake. And the Bear River dumps into the Great Salt Lake. So the chances of dipping into the Bear River up there by Idaho is probably non-existent. If
You're not taking that water away from Idaho farmers.
Yeah, that's the other side we haven't talked. They have to work through. So I don't see that's an option. So unless we're busing it out of Flaming Gorge, I don't know where we're going to get this, and that's incredibly expensive. Water is the issue. we got to do our part, okay? Good briefing, appreciate that. Any comments for Travis in terms of what he's presented to us?
When you're talking about the $130,000, is that including like the cost of staff time, the cost of removal, cost of plants? Is that total, or is that just
No.
replacement?
That does not include their costs. You know, and the other thing I do need to tell you guys on this, so I'm glad you asked that question because it prompted me. We have smaller windows to be able to do some of these things. The Parks Department's not a huge department, and we get to certain times of the year, we're a maintenance crew. You know, I mean, it's unlocking and cleaning bathrooms and mowing and fertilizing and aerating and doing some things like this. And we do have a window, you know, but some of these projects, even if we get funding for, won't start till later in the fall because the day-to-day of May through September, it fills our day, you know, but it doesn't mean we don't feel we can get them done later in the year. So that's, I do want you to know that. I don't want any expectations of getting a phone call going on July 13th going, I haven't seen them out, because you won't. You won't see them out till later in the year.
Could you ever consider community help?
Yeah, I mean, we do have events and programs where we use the community. We have our day of service. I would have to really think of logistically how we could potentially put it together, if maybe it could be something that is possible.
Still requires manpower to get all that going.
Sure, and I don't want to commit to that at this point. I'd rather talk to staff and say, is there a way that we can tie in volunteer hours to help with this process? I'd rather consult with staff before I said a yes to that.
Other comments, questions, council?
Overall, you were talking about some things would be about sixes in regards to staffing cost, like, you know, if you're going to spray versus mow. But then I got the impression there are some areas that it might be a lot more or possibly more expensive. And so when you're doing that, do you have a general idea of like what types of things are going to really increase that cost? And will we really need to be looking at increased staff for maintenance? Because a lot of times xeriscaping is a lot more, you know.
Yeah, that's a great
maintenance
question. And I think one of the most critical things is design. You know, the design is going to be very critical. The other critical thing is one of the reasons most people, and we're guilty of this as a city, to be honest with you, where we get a lot of weed problems, is a lot of our irrigation is broadcast irrigation. You know, I mean, we spray it out with nozzles, and whether it be rotors, MP rotors, or whether it be, you know, the Falcons, the type ones. And because we're watering areas we shouldn't be watering, it leads to more weeds, you know, and we're optimistic that if we design something well and there's bubblers or you know, different things that just isolate to it, we're hoping to keep it down. There's always that Mother Nature element, though. You know, I mean, and that's the part that's a little bit of a challenge. There's, if we go back to half an hour ago, staffing challenges. You know, if we don't get enough staff or it hits at the wrong time of the year, you know, we might have to decide, do we go mow that area or do we go spray and pull weeds? And, you know, hopefully that was addressed earlier tonight, but moving forward, if it gets out of control, if weeds start taking over and you can't spot spray and do different things, there's no doubt it's going to take a lot more time for us.
Thank you.
So I was just thinking about the splash pad. So now I know how we cut back the hours last year. So maybe we could just do a few days a week and have less hours. And
I think, like I say, I don't know that tonight's the time to have that discussion. I think we need to see what happens for the next month and a half. But I did want you to think about it, you know, and I did want you to think about, you know, if we get water cut starting 30 days later and ending 30 days sooner and minimal water days, I think that's the decision we have to make going, okay, is this the wise decision,
right,
whatever it be.
Is that water at Harmon's, that recyclable water that just recycles
It
itself?
is, but it's like any other water. There is evaporation issues,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, not obviously, there are evaporation issues there, but it is recyclable.
Okay.
And the decision might very well be, council, that you just simply says, we just don't turn the waterfall on.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no water going in and circulating, it serves no purpose as long as there can be a feed that goes to those trees and keeps the trees alive and well. Then the trees survive, it grows, but we just turn the unit off. And you may not have read it into the law that's being considered, but one of the requirements that you have to consider, or the planning commission has to consider, is about those pools and those waterfalls. And it would be pretty hard pressed if I was a resident simply says, you won't allow me to have my little pond in my backyard, but you got that waterfall running up there, just streaming down at each one of the entry points coming into Roy. That's a hard conversation to have, and I guarantee you, Matt and I would probably be the first ones called, okay? You try to restrict my pond, and you have those waterfalls running. So I think we have to look at this from a broad perspective and say, what's the right decision as we move forward, and then kind of stick to that.
And that's why we wanted to bring it up, you know, I mean, not so much to get a resolution on it tonight, but to get us thinking about it a little bit.
Any other comments, council?
Every city in the state is going to have to follow these same guidelines, right? Because I know last year we weren't supposed to be watering as much, and I went to my granddaughter's softball games and soccer games, and I would go past their parks and some of their city buildings. I'm like, yeah, I don't think they've turned their water off, because they were as green as could be. So it's supposed to be a statewide thing, right?
Well, there
It's
is,
spo-
to
I
to
mean-
that question, let me just help that. I pointed out and sent to you all of the laws the legislators have put in motion, and they're talking a lot of issues dealing with water. And those are laws. If the governor signs those, there's some expectations that'll be driving every municipality. The only one that I've seen where there might be an issue is what they call a 5. They probably, because they're more rural, they have more agricultural elements. And by the way, agriculture is the biggest consumer of our water on the Wasatch Front. But those of us who are 3, 4, what they call a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or 4 or 5 or 4, this legislation is basically pointing at us. You need to come up with a water conservation plan, and they're pretty direct on what they're looking for. I think John's point was well taken. If we can convince the municipality residents, encourage them to basically, on our incentive program, to basically remove it, pay them a little money to go ahead and make the transition, that's a better way to move forward in water conservation than be forced in where we're forcing it. Because I promise you, if the water district has to make a choice between watering our fields or having drinking water, there will not be a choice. That field will not get watered.
Well, and even with Flip Your Strip, there's incentive for us as municipalities to go through and implement it where we could take and actually go after the funds as well.
It's because right now it's only dealing with the property owner and it's not dealing with the governments. And I checked on that to find out, because I was hoping that maybe somebody would have tucked in some money to help the municipalities, which are big consumers, but it's not in there yet. This is about the private sector. And the laws talk some interesting things. It says have a living, well, you can read it. I gave you all a copy of the ordinances or the laws.
So what about the water we sell to West Haven? They're just growing and growing and growing and growing.
No, that's another conversation that Matt and I have. Roy City does provide water to West Haven. And by the way, and I talked to Matt about that one, if you read in the bill, there's an interesting one in there, and I won't bore you with that, but there's an interesting one in there that I asked Matt to sit down with Andy and Brody and find out if in fact we may be, since we're a water provider, if we in fact have to do some things in terms of providing, I'll share with which one it is, then I'll let you look it up yourself. But it specifically states, sorry for the delay, I guess there's a lot of bills that was passed, and we're still winding through this. But it deals with what's called Senate Bill 89. And Senate Bill 89 is talk about water amendments, so it's kind of a little more general. But it specifically says this: if you are a water provider, and the definition of a water provider is a retail water supplier or a water conservative district. So we know the Roy Conservative District, we definitely know the Weber Basin Conservative District. But it says this in definition, what is a retail water supplier? That means a person that supplies water for human consumption and other domestic uses to an end user and has more than 500 service connections. I can't help but think the thousands of gallons that we send to West Haven feeds a few more than 500, service connections. If that's the case, here's what it says in the law. The water conservative plan has to be and shall contain a clear stated overall water reduction goal that is consistent with some policies in there, which means as a water provider, we now also have to look about how we're going to reduce that consumption rate to West Haven. I mentioned that to the mayor last time I seen him. Well, I'm going to have to have him read the article. So it's something we have to deal with, and it's a reality as we're helping our neighbor to get this water issue. Anything else, council?
Lots of work, Travis. Thank you.
thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Lizzie.
I
Excellent.
I deserve very, very little credit.
Good job,
Staff
Lizzie.
and
Good job.
Lizzie putting it all together. You know, the rest of the staff getting numbers citywide, Matt, finance, HR, everybody chipped in, so.
Okay, nice briefing. Thank you. Great effort. Okay, we have another one. Youth Council. I think, Sophie, you're going to talk to us about this. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I just want to get some opinions and maybe some comments or questions on how to start a youth council group, a group of students developing leadership skills and making positive impact on their schools and community through service. Wanted to talk a little bit about recruitment and retention, a little bit about meetings and budgets and some goals. And I think not a lot of discussion can happen because I want the students to be able to drive this, but I want to get some ideas together to have this going for next year. I've talked to several groups, several cities now, West Point, Layton, and Ogden, and they do them with a school cycle. So they start with their school year, and and it doesn't have to be student gov. It can be anything from just kids that want to get involved to homeschoolers to scout groups, and I just want to be able to give them an opportunity to be a part of something. Let them come up with what their needs are, what their wants are, what they want to do as far as service. And then as far as a budget, just kind of seeing if they want to get together and do activities or just to be a part of the goal and the activity, and then have projects that allow them to be creative and get them involved with because they're the next ones that are going to be, they're going to be doing this. Sure. They're going to be the ones that are up here. So just a little bit of discussion on some ideas. I think it's nothing. At first I was like, ooh, let's get this going right now. But the more I talk, the more I think it's got to be on a school year. So we're kind of on the end of that, but have some process for some applications, for some getting the word out there to see if we can get some activity and involvement. I love that Nevaeh is doing this, and I want to be able to, I've talked about this a couple of times. Everybody right now is getting a 4.0. Everybody, it's the kids we've got great achieving, the academical, it's amazing. But to have this on a scholarship application or something that's going to make them stand out a little bit, I want to give them that opportunity. So, any comments?
Council, what's your thoughts?
So what do you perceive this like as in something in conjunction with this, something that's separate? How many people? Is this instead of one youth council member? Is this, what's your picture that way?
A group, most of them have 9 to 12 people, so nothing crazy big, but they were all commenting that back in the day they were 20 plus.
Sure.
So
I mean,
it's gone down.
Yeah, back when I was at Roy High many moons ago, there was like Orrin Hatch's Youth Advisory Council that I sat on. There were other different various groups like that. My daughters, my two daughters in particular, and I mean, one thing that we have in our advantage here in Roy is we only have a single high school. So I think we should probably, from that vantage, target Roy High. Particularly, they're coming up on their next year's student class officers, student body officers being elected. And so I think maybe doing I kind of coined the term in my head like council to council, where basically we meet with the student council on a recurring basis, whether that's on a quarterly basis. And again, they always also have, as part of student government, they always have service projects, things of that they're taking and working on. I would definitely lean on Nevaeh to kind of give us that inside view there. But I mean, I think reaching out to, I believe it is, I think you told me, I think it's Angie Knutson.
Yes.
Angie Knutson,
Yes.
Who's over student government. Interestingly enough, we graduated from Roy High School the same year. What year was that, Ann?
Let's see, 1998.
Atta girl, yes, 1998. So, and superpower. But basically leaning into like what they already have in terms of the structure that's already built there, and then looking to take and expand it out beyond maybe student government would be worthwhile. Would kind of be how I would envision it.
I've
I've had a
just do
few-
high school, not junior high, just high
No,
school.
I was hoping for
Yeah.
2 representatives from each of the junior highs.
Correct. We start with the high school,
Homeschool.
right?
I've had a couple reach out. That's why I say homeschool, because
Gotcha.
I have had a few reach out to me on some homeschooling. Scouting, and I don't want to say age limit, but there's got to be, there's got to be a little bit of an age limit. West Point they were young. They were 12, 13, I think. I'm not sure what the ages are in Layton. But yeah, I want to start out a little bit higher in age, but
Fair enough.
And the purpose of this is to create, have them do service projects?
give
That's
them
what
the
you're saying?
opportunities, yeah. to be a
More
part
community,
of-
because if there's one thing that the youth are good at, it's getting the word out when we have different things.
Then
So-
maybe, would you meet with other cities and their councils, exchange
have.
ideas and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
or
yeah,
once
do
we get a
like
council,
cross
right.
council type stuff. Why
Yeah,
not?
so at first, I don't know. I mean, I want to see how much they want to meet. There's a few cities that meet, she was saying twice a week. I was like, oh man, that's a little bit extreme, but I get it. Like, I get the kids are involved and they want to do this. So I'm hoping for like maybe once a quarter type of it to start it out. And just to simple things like Lizzie does the egg hunt. They could help with stuff like that. We do Roy Days. There's, I'm sure, an activity or something they could be involved in there. So just things that we're already doing, and let them be involved and take on some responsibility.
For sure. Nevaeh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, so speaking from my current position of being an officer and then just the process of running and then everything after that, there's people who don't get the opportunity to be in student government, but they still want an opportunity to do something with the school. And I know I've seen it happen. Like, a lot of people are just like, well, I didn't make it for this position, so I just can't do anything. Just going to leave it up to the people who did. And I think after elections, like around this time, we find out on Thursday who SBOs are. And so like around this time every year, it's always like we're figuring out who is and who isn't. I think it'd be good to reach out to everyone who like both is and is not in office and give them the opportunity. And I think it'd be really awesome, because I think people who didn't make it for that year would love to be a part of it.
I'm so glad you said that. So that was one of my first, I was hoping to get with Angie and say, okay, who is because I know when you're in a position like that, you're already busy. Those kids, their schedule is crazy.
Right.
So
we
to
struggle
be able
having people to come.
Yeah. So to take those kids that maybe didn't make it and to put them in, because it's still, I mean, I think it'd look amazing on a scholarship application to be a part of this. So that's what I'm hoping for.
And I predict this will be Roy High's new student body president.
We are.
Oh, that's just my opinion.
Okay, council, any more thoughts on this idea? How do we proceed?
So what I kind of would like to do to proceed is to maybe get a little bit of a budget to do, not that anything that would need to be set in stone or set right now, but just to do a group of applications, maybe T-shirts, $200. It's not anything crazy. So maybe an activity or so, you know, something to introduce them to a program or get to know each other type thing once the program gets going. And like I say, it's going to be a few months. It's not nothing I'm getting. Yeah, I don't
Wanting
think
this before the end of June to do this? Or are you thinking of getting this ready for the next budget to be ready to start with the new school year?
have it up and running for the new school year, but I don't think anything would go before June.
So how would you advertise? Just put up some posters in the high schools and junior highs and
Advertising would be
and on
Angie.
Facebook or
And yeah,
Angie,
getting with
yeah.
the schools and seeing, and I say like the 3 junior high, you know, the junior highs and the high school.
One thing we could also do is work with the resource officers at each of the different schools, the high school and the 2 junior highs, to see if they have anybody that they'd actually recommend as well. So
Yeah.
just some thoughts, because like I said, we've got city staff effectively in building and a council member that works at Roy High as
Right.
well. And Nevaeh,
I would
who-
be
I was getting
excited.
down there. I was making my way down.
You're fine.
I would be excited for 5 or 6 people at this first go round, but I mean, who knows? We might get 20. I have no idea. That's why I think you got to start the application process.
Correct. Well, and then going back to like what Travis was talking about in terms of like these would be great ambassadors to go out there and say, hey, look, if you're looking for a good, summer position, Roy Recreation is looking for people. Again, there's lots of
Yeah.
synergy that I just use the stupid buzzword synergy that you can actually get from, getting our youth engaged. So.
Okay, so let me ask the question, council. It sounds like there seems to be some interest within the council to pursue this. If it would be okay, Sophie, how about we take your concept, let's put a little bit more meat on it, give us a little bit more of the details of what you think you're going to need between now and the budget cycle, which ends on the 30th. Come back to a city council meeting, let's finish the conversation so we can say, yeah, it looks like it's something to go with, because we now understand clearly where this thing can really have its potential. You okay with that? Okay. Then we okay to leave it? Let her go ahead and just continue this, put some meat on this conversation, and then bring it back to the council so we can basically say, yeah, proceed. Because she really needs your concurrence to move forward on this. But I'm sensing you like it, but there's still a lot of questions how it's going to kind of work together. So, Sophie, if you can help us pin that down, I think we got something here. Okay, good. We have a couple of discussion items, moving to the H then, establishing R1 and R1, 3, 4, or 5 zoning ordinance. Joe, we put that on there in large part because in a city council meeting discussion, you kind of threw that idea out. And I thought we might want to just kind of continue that dialogue and see how we want to proceed. So I think either you or I, but I'd like to see if you'd like to step up, give your idea of what you're thinking in terms of establishing then an R1, 3, 4, or 5 zoning code.
Well, I'd like to see something like was, we took an an R6 or an R3 zone, probably an R3 zone, and chopped it up quite a bit, removed about 90% of it, and then allowed them to go ahead and build their development. What I'd like to do is, because I think there are other areas in the city that qualify for that, and there's probably redevelopment in the future that will happen, that it probably makes sense to make a zone for the type of development that we saw.
Okay.
And so that would be my recommendation is,
Well, the process would be is that whatever the
got his hand up.
recommendation has to go back to Steve. Steve has to put it in front of the planning commission to come up with some recommendations on it. So, Steve, you like to talk that?
Yeah, well, just for quick clarification, what they did on that particular development falls under the PUD, PRUD?
but we got rid of that.
No, but they can bring it back, according to Andy. I mean, that was the conversation.
Yeah, to me, that would be the route I'd prefer, rather than saying an R13, R14,
Sure.
R15, is to redevelop the PRUD ordinance, which would allow for, if you have so many acres and you fit this, then this and this and this can happen, which that particular project would have fallen under when he first originally.
That's the first thing he looked for, is if we had a PUD.
Yeah, when he first contacted me, he says, okay, where's your PRUD ordinance? And I said, we don't have one. I said, you just have to do a development agreement, and it really made the process a lot longer. I have no problem going, let's see, got flip your strip, I've got it, okay. Going through and finding, you know, our old PRUD ordinance from 2004, finding out what other cities, especially the bigger ones, how they've got it, and then, you know, proceed forward. It won't be tomorrow that I bring it to you, but if that's the route you guys would like, is at least have that option that we've already listed what you can and can't have versus, you know, asking for a development agreement to, you know, have a variance on this or a variance on that. It's already set. You know,
And
if
I'm
you have-
okay with that. I was just thinking we ought to have something in our code that allows for that, so we don't have to, I won't use the term I was gonna use, but, destroy another code to allow something to
and
happen.
the PRUD is what helps it. It's, you
Why
know,
was that deleted?
I'd have to go back to the 2005 introduction of the current code.
I was gonna say, when I was on the planning commission, we didn't have one.
Yeah, I don't know why, we had one in 2004, and then it was gone in 2005, and I'm not sure why.
So council, you okay with then asking staff to go ahead and put together some ideas on a PRUD?
Yeah,
And I'd really
And-
like to know why it was eliminated to begin with, because, you know, for us just to
What's the
go through the
reasoning?
same motions and then have the same problems, it'd be nice to know why they did it, and if we're
Yeah,
gonna do
I
another
can
one.
research it, and when I bring it
Okay.
forward, we
Thank
let
you.
you know.
And bring that back to you, Diane, or for us as a council, so
Yes.
you have better understanding.
I think you have somebody on the planning commission that was on the city council back then.
He's just an alternate.
He's not
Oh, I
here.
thought
but-
he was here.
No.
The way you
he-
were pointing.
No. I'm just saying he would probably have better,
Yeah.
more context just for.
He might have.
Yeah.
His memory's
But,
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's gonna, yeah.
So we okay with that, council? Shall we go
Yeah.
ahead and allow him to come back with a draft PR? It's a PRUD.
PRUD.
Yeah, just because there are different land parcels that would fit in, and you know, at some point with our age city, and that, I think there might be some areas that may be redeveloped under one of those. So
Okay? Matt, it seems like a task if we can get the planning commission to go ahead and work that, okay? Perfect. And I think a little explanation in terms of what Diane's suggesting of how we deviated from that might be in order if we can find that answer. That would be helpful too. Perfect. Okay, update the general plan. Randy, who's talking this one?
I just wanted to add it on.
Oh, wrong Randy. Go ahead, Randy.
Oh, yeah, no, that was me. As I say, did you want, I mean, if you put it on, that's fine. You can talk about it, but I just don't want, anyway. No, just, what are we thinking? Because ideally, I would love to see us get the general plan voted and behind us by the April 19th city council meeting. I've met with Steve on a couple of occasions. I've addressed my kind of concerns. There's typos, there's some clarifications in terms of like the different various green spaces that I think we need to work through. But just, again, we have a very, very, very heavy fiscal year budget conversation that's coming up that's, like I said, I'm already trying to get ahead of.
May and June are going to be real busy with
very.
budget.
Yeah, so my concern is just, you know, effectively getting the general plan pushed forward and moved through with expedience is all I'm at.
Okay, let me offer a couple of thoughts here, and then we can kind of decide to move forward. Ann, great to have you back. We've been hesitant to kind of move on this until we got assured that you're back with us, and we're excited about that. A couple of approaches that can be done. One is that you can, and you may have already done this, you can send your recommendations to Steve, indicate some areas of that. He can have that, which I think is helpful, gives him a much better position to see where we are on some of the different elements. But maybe at the end of the day, it may very well come down to a page. You're looking at what the general plan says on this page, and you like it, or you want to kind of tweak it as it looks at the whole thing. It could be a little cumbersome. It takes some more time, but it's incredibly thorough. So the challenge we got to look at would be it's going to require, in my opinion, probably 2 more workshops.
Okay.
So to get through 2 more workshops, we're going to need to probably take hopefully a city council meeting. Matt and I will look and see if there's anything pressing on a city council meeting. We use one of those, but we may, in order for us to try to get this done before April, we may necessarily need to bring in an off-cycle, special work session, and then where we can delve into this and just finish this thing up. Ultimately, if we can get it all worked out, the benefit would be is all you have to do then is bring it to the council for a final approval, and we can knock that out with just a vote. But it's that prep work that needs to be done prior to that.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I don't want it to go the route of Chapter 13 because that about bankrupt us. It
There was a lot of
fell
time
right
in
in
that.
line with that terminology.
Yeah.
Well, and I've had the opportunity to meet with several of, with them and to get questions answered and comments and what about this and what about that. And so, yeah, that helped a lot. That did.
Yeah, I think the workshop really allows you, if you come prepared in the strategy. I'll sit down with Matt and Steve. We'll work out a little strategy for the workshops to make sure we can jump right into it. And then we'll get that information to you. And then let's come prepared and let's see if we can't knock this thing out. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think that that's very important because we want, of course, it's a flexible breathing document, but that initial thrust is what's going to be so important. After that is just, manipulation. But if you don't get it right at the beginning, then you have a lot of problems going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, then we'll just plan to try to get this thing all cleaned up, all done before the end of April. I'd like to get it done before the 15th.
Yeah.
We'll push for that, but we'll try to get this thing done before the end of April because May and June are heavy, heavy budget.
It's going to be heavy.
And we've got to work through those budget cycles, okay? Perfect. Okay, Youth Council social media account, okay?
Yes. Okay. I think there should just be, I just typed up some bullet points so that you guys could see what I was writing instead of me just talking it. But I think, yeah, it should be coming up soon. Okay. It's right here. Sorry, it's kind of small. Oh, I didn't realize this. Okay. Kind of simple, short. It would be run by me and whoever the next youth city council member is. I hope it would just keep going, whoever that could be the leader of it. I think it would be good for me to just introduce myself and kind of what I do or what this spot does, and maybe just a little bit of how city council works, kind of just when we meet and things like that. And then monthly public events like sports, plays and musicals, and then academic tournaments for the junior highs and high school. And then encouragement or a safe place to ask questions about the city or suggestions of any kind having to do with youth. And I don't know about this one, but my mom actually just said this would be a good idea, and I was like, oh, it kind of is. Congratulations to the students of the month. So I could do a highlight of them and just say that the city supports them and congratulate, just because it is a really cool opportunity.
We do that actually already in the Roy Connection, so just linking back to that. So just throwing that
in
out
the
there.
newspaper?
Yeah, the monthly.
We just do two.
Yeah,
Not
we just
like
do
the-
two.
not like
But we
Royal
already
a
do
month.
that, so this would be an easy extension of
Yeah.
that.
Right, okay, yeah, so that can just
Not
be
like at the high
here
school.
on people's phones. I don't know. I was just thinking about this, and a lot of the time I feel like when a lot of this stuff could be found on the school's pages, but then again, that requires people to go to them. But if they're just scrolling through their Instagram feed and they follow this account, I mean, maybe hopefully this will get the message across in a more connecting way. And then just notifications of any summertime youth events, which I don't know if there is currently any in place, but I think it would be cool to have some so that I could.
And
put it on there.
advertise for the rec part-time jobs.
Yeah,
Yes, that was also,
Stole my thunder. I was just going to say that, Diane.
I had it written down on my paper right as you were talking. This is amazing to have this many openings for people to be able to hopefully apply to them. And so I hope that I could just put that out there, that how great of a job it is, and just encouragement
awesome
for that.
bosses and supervisors and all
Yeah,
that good
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think a lot of people, it's just the fact they don't want to go out and look and research their own things. It's if you are shown something that is a really great position, I think more people would love to apply and just honestly know that I didn't even know that there was a need for positions or people to apply. So maybe people will because of that. And yeah, I think that's basically it. I was
Okay,
open
comments?
to any questions or
Best
anything.
of all, the cost is zero except for Nevaeh's time.
Yes,
that's
which
the-
I'm more than willing to
Perfect. Okay.
give. So
Okay,
yeah.
questions, comments?
The attorney's side, any concerns?
I was gonna say, yeah, no, I know. We would here's how we would combat it. We would turn around and set the account up with some type of youth council at Roy City email address. We would take and do our social media archiving based upon that, and it would suck in all the information. Good.
That's the tech side of it.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep. And that's the compliance side.
And that's half of the compliance.
Okay, keep going.
That is just the concern with any official social media is what's being said, what's being commented, and what's not. Nothing we can't overcome, but it would require whoever's in charge of it to work with staff and make sure, and I know this is terrible and I have to be the bad guy in the room, but there would almost need to be a pre-check of what's being posted and what's being said.
That's right.
Oh,
Fair enough.
definitely.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anybody who runs the Facebook pages here.
Sure.
Yeah, that was also something I was thinking about too. There is also a way to turn off comments on posts, and so if I were to post something, I can just
Shut it
say
down.
like DM if you have any comments or suggestions. Don't put it to the public because Instagram can filter what they say. So, and then also just to whoever I would need to approve it by, I could just send any post.
Well, it needs to be city manager, even the mayor, when he sends information to go into the magazine, I always send it to the city manager. And if there's an issue between me and Brittany and the city manager, we'll work that piece before it goes to print. And we do have some time on that. So what I ask would be is let's coordinate that, just make sure we'll set up a process. And then once we get that process down, you'll find it goes real smooth.
Okay.
But we just need to make sure you're going to represent the Roy City. And when you do, there are some stipulations that we have to govern by if you're representing Roy City. And that's what they want to make sure they check. Just make sure we're okay legally and there's no issues, and then have fun.
Okay.
Like I say, if you can get some help for Travis and his team.
Yes. Many of my friends work for Roy Rec, and so it breaks my heart to even think about it not being able to be open. So when you're talking, I'm very I want to tell people who are looking for jobs, I'm going to tell them that they should work there because, that's a need, definitely. So.
I like it. If we could get a copy of your information to the council, because that is a little hard for me to see, that would be helpful.
Sorry.
And then if you
Brittany's
could,
got those,
the action item from this council, if it's okay, would be is have her to work with Matt and staff, just to make sure she can kind of flow this thing out, make sure we have all the bells and whistles, for a better word, worked out before we go to print. You okay with that?
Totally cool.
Okay.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good deal. We're excited. Okay, city manager report.
Yep, just a couple of things. Save the date on April 16th at 10 a.m. We have the Easter egg hunt with Waste Management. Great event, very short actually. The candy only lasts about 30 seconds. So, and then also the dumpsters are coming back on April 18th through the 30th, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturdays, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., closed Sundays. So mark your calendars for
At
that.
Public Works, right?
What's that?
That's at the Public
Yep,
Works.
at the Public Works building. And then lastly, we will be re-releasing the tow RFP tomorrow. So
Is that right?
we reviewed it for the first go. So we just had a couple of updates on that. So if people did apply, put in a bid, that will be, you don't have to redo it. It says that in the RFP as well. So I just look for that. It'll go for another 30 days. And that's it.
Perfect. Okay, council, any comments, anything you'd like to see done?
Well, the sign by Sacco's is done, and I talked to the sign maker today, and he's starting on the north one next week. So
Cool.
maybe one day we'll have both those done. He promised me he'd
great.
get it on it, so.
That's complete, that's perfect, thank you. Anything else, council?
I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Let me share just a couple of things, and then we will. Just to remind you, for those that are involved, the Boys and Girls Club extravaganza for the 26th of March. If you're going to be involved with that, that's always a great thing. Paul, you'll like this one. The CTC Family Dinner Night is the 25th of March.
Thank you for reporting on that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Is it 25th of March?
25th, yeah. So just be aware, mark that down, 25th of March, and that'll be a great night. We get a lot of people involved with that family dinner night. That's a great thing. And I sent you, Council, a copy of the Ogden Pioneer Days Parade.
Are you sure it's not the 25th of April?
No, actually, I pulled it up and wrote both of them down.
Because it's 25th of April, which is a Monday, because they always do it on a Monday night.
Oh,
That's why I kind of looked at you funny.
okay. Well, I appreciate that update then. 25th of April. Actually, I got to send it. Information that says the 25th of March.
Where's that dinner at? That family night dinner? I just remember the one where we had handed out the sandwich. I guess I don't remember this other
It
one.
was out at.
I think they're going to do it at the same place.
Oh, they're
It's just, I
gonna-
think they're having it in March instead of normally in
In April.
September.
It's in April.
Or
April instead of
And it'll
September.
be the same thing. We'll go over there and hand out food again? Okay,
Yeah. And we get hundreds of people involved in that. That's a lot of fun.
yeah.
Okay, so right now, it looks like the 25th of April, and I'll go back and check my calendar. And then the Pioneer Days Parade. If Roy City would like to put something into the Ogden Parade, that is scheduled to happen, we have to have our decision made and application in by the 10th of July. But to put a parade together or a float together or anything that we'd like to do as a city, they're inviting us to do that. Please look at the piece of paper I gave you. We'll bring this up. We just need to have some direction, how we want to proceed. What's interesting enough about that, and I've done this before, Travis, Matt, I was asked of different organization to build a float to put in this parade, and we're able to do that, and then turn right around and brought it into the Roy Days Parade. And it worked perfect. They was involved in both of those. So we have some options there if we'd like to do that. So think about that, but you have some information in front of you to proceed.
I have a correction on the dinner. It's actually at the Hope Center.
Is that the Hope Center dinner?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the Roy CTC Family Dinner Night, 5 to 7 on the 25th of April at the Hope Center.
Okay.
Isn't that the one where we had to get a table?
No, I think
No.
this is going to be where we distribute it.
That's what's that.
We just have to, we'll have some food trucks that will come in, and they can actually come in, whether they do it by food truck or something, but it'll be right there. I remember Matt and I got the request, we were working it, we just had to make sure that the fire department can get access, so there had to be some permits we had to do, but it was not clear in terms of what night that was, but I'll work with the 25th of April. But it will be food trucks will be authorized, they'll work all that piece, and then the people just come and enjoy, and CTC will take care of all that.
For free.
For free.
Right.
But by the way, part of that usually comes back to the city council as part of our legislative budget, because we help in that, okay? So just be aware, we'll work out those numbers, okay? Okay. With that, I don't have anything else, so Joe,
I'll make that motion.
thank you.
I'll second it.
Motion to adjourn. And who, Ann, you gave me a second on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. Great meeting, a lot of great information. Yeah, we have an RDA board meeting. I'll take about 6-8 minutes, and then we'll come back and have our RDA board meeting.
I've been so busy all day. and I didn't already-
Hey, Travis, could you send me a soft copy
So
of
I
that?
stopped about it, piece chicken nuggets, and I left 5 of them on Matt's. Well, I had to hurry and eat, so. Yeah, your guys took me by ambulance.
Yeah.
to-
you
What do you
know,
just do to
looked
the
at it.
council?
You take a picture
To the
of
I
it,
council?
will always
Yeah.
take everything in a paperless format.
And they went,
Yeah, that's some good information.
Yeah, that's actually really well done.
and I got worse once I got in the hospital. I broke out in fever blisters all over here, all over here, over here.
You gotta stand up, Sophie.
And Matt's like, I'm gonna come see you. I said, like hell you are. You are not allowed in my room. It looked like pure crap. And I felt like a. Well, they actually went in and took it out surgically last Thursday. She only left a few little pieces, and then she left the stent in until yesterday. And hallelujah, she took that out. Because every time I stood up, I had to go to the bathroom. And it was instant relief the minute she took it out, because she said it had moved. And she goes, no, I thought you had to pee all the time. I'm like, yeah, this is free torture, you know. But I guess I didn't realize how sick I was. The sepsis was so bad. It was 2 different strains of bacteria. He said within 2 days I could have died. And he's like, listen to your body. If you have stomach aches and backaches And, you know, you need to go to the freaking doctor. And it wasn't until that pain hit me in the middle of the night when I called my doctor.
Maybe they were just waiting to see when the city was
It
gonna
was
issue.
pretty good. I'm dying.
I think they sent a
And I'm being-
message calling you it's being reissued.
I really thought I was, and then I was so nauseated when I got to the emergency room, I was throwing up, and
So
then
they had to go
they couldn't keep me warm.
open it up,
Blanket
but
after blanket.
Get more points the closer
And
you
as soon as I
are.
peed in the cup, they looked at my urine and
I haven't had a chance to
something
read the
wrong.
RFP, so I don't
So
know
then
what,
it did that
what they're
CT
thinking.
scan, and then when they said.
But you know, it's interesting that they've redirected that,
Roy City, please don't
trying
let
to
me-
municipalities to establish their own food truck.
And then I looked up at them and I'm like, oh shit.
determined the rotation is flawed.
A lot of issues with that
I wanted to
rotation.
go to McKD, but the nurse was like pissed that I mentioned it. What's wrong with Davis? This is a Davis facility. I said, I've just heard some bad things about it. Well, you know, and I'm like, fine, where the hell you take me? Just take me somewhere. And so they took me there, and I did get really good care. And my urologist works out of there, and her daughter plays softball with my granddaughter, so I knew her. And so she was really up forward about everything about me, and she came to see me 3 times in the hospital. I don't remember her coming one time. I mean, I didn't eat for 3 days. I couldn't even get out of bed. I was so just out of it. The kids spent every day with me, and they take turns at night. The only movie I remember watching was Behind Enemy Lines, but I guess we watched movies every night. The TVs in them rooms are about that big. And no channels. Oh, I miss Aaron so much. I missed my grandkids so
I've got
much.
one.
Yeah, it was scary, I guess. Courting. Yeah, and then while I was in the hospital, mice and rodents got into my freaking house. Oh yeah, that's been the,
Well, thank you. I couldn't be here.
that is
but-
the, worst thing I've ever encountered in my whole freaking entire life. They've come twice. I stayed at my daughter's house 4 nights, came again today. And I'm a clean freak. I mean, the doctor had to give
No,
me
but you're gonna go
specific.
through this.
My daughter said, you need to tell her she can't clean. And I said, I can do light housework. He said, what do you consider light housework? I said, can I mop my floor? He goes, no. Light, wash dishes, that's all you can do. And I'm like, fine. You know, I still did vacuum though after a few days. So,
When do we have to have a decision for this?
When you have to what?
A decision, or what do we have to
I
do?
mean,
Like,
I can only
We
sit
have
on
to
my butt in
fill
my
out an
box
applicant.
so many days.
I mean, that looks
You
like
know,
so
and
far
I
away,
was
but when you're
tired
looking
of
at it,
sitting there. But I have a lot of friends that came to visit me and
so.
that,
I
you
was
know,
just
and my
doing my
daughter
summer
was with me
download.
all the time. I have a daughter who's not married.
10th of July is
been
when the
staying at her
application has
house,
to be in the city.
but I'm gonna
city.
Just leave all the
But we
TVs
need
on in my
decision.
house tonight and sleep at my house tonight, because
And
the
we can submit the application
exterminator
anytime,
said
but
if they hear
we want
noise,
is
they
Roy
won't come
City
in your
to put
house, and
something
there's
together.
traps everywhere, plus
And
my
interesting
son-in-law
enough,
set more
they-
traps
They
up.
may even have some
And,
trailers that
so
could
I'm
be
just
used to
like,
decorate a
oh,
float if we want to
can't handle
float.
it.
All have to
And
be
then
a
my
few
neighbor,
chapters.
who was my very best friend, died on Sunday.
It doesn't have to be that.
They
It
just
could be a
asked me to
marching
speak at their
band, it
funeral,
could be
and my kids are all laughing
couple of
because I have
vehicles,
to keep it
trucks,
under
it
5
could-
minutes, and they know how much I talk.
Trailer that has
And
a
so
sign,
they're
Roy
all
City,
sending me texts.
anything
I've known
wrong.
Joanne 30 years.
Great.
Not Roy. Another
That's it.
municipality.
And then
Thank you,
that's it.
Randy.
Both
I was
Grand
hoping you'd
Jackson
have
was-
one of these checklists for us. Thanks.
That makes it simpler
Yeah,
than
I'm still
reading 80.
A little weak.
Well, maybe not quite 80.
I'm not gonna stay over this.
You got to go through 5 different chapters to pull out 5 different things. So
Look at you, you're so nice. Oh, thank you.
Interesting enough, you didn't do that for me.
No, where's the other one? Joe.
That fridge stock, we buy hundreds of cases.
I know,
I
I know.
Well,
Oh, that's so funny.
but it's, the walk downstairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe going home.
I will, I will.
Hey, good luck too.
Yeah, it's bad.
Thank
Should
you.
work to go
Thank you. I need
downstairs.
it. I'm so worried.
I'm not
I'm so
walking
worried.
down there.
Oh, I
that's right.
told
Just give him a key and say, Plenty of water down there.
All the way in the corner
It all depends.
Okay, I can be concise if you can be concise.
Want to have good discussion.
You do have one thing in your favor, and that's daylight savings time in this regard, because my body doesn't think it's 8 o'clock yet.
Oh, see, mine's
Still working on 7.
It's still work, yeah, yeah. So I'm not saying like drag it out per se, but
Oh, I got an hour.
Planning Commission has in its rules, there's a time it just ends.
is that, yeah? There's a hard stop rule?
Council has never adopted that.
Do we need to do, yeah, can we do a hard stop rule? Is that what we're talking?
When I was
do you get into,
city manager,
Public comment period where you're
lady
dealing
else,
with
mayor.
property tax increases.
Oh,
There'll be
truth and,
Said
oh,
council thing.
well, and the catwalks, remember catwalks? Oh my good heavens.
We had to install
Yeah, you
buttons,
almost have to put a restriction that says, we'll give you 3 minutes.
and you pushed a button if you.
Right.
It was a non, at the county
And
level.
he had a rule on the agenda
It had to be over
that
100,
no item
maybe
could be
110. I was
discussed more
probably, when I
than
spoke,
10
I was probably
minutes.
number 30.
Mhm.
unless
I
there
sat
was
back
a
in my
motion
chair
made
for
to
another 10,
extend the
15 minutes,
discussion.
and I says, I'm done.
We went
Right.
from council
I left.
meetings going
Paper
until
says they didn't get out until after midnight.
Holy
10:30,
cow.
11 o'clock at night. 45 minutes.
I'm good, thank you.
I mean, it was so streamlined.
You went
I was so
downstairs.
streamlined, because when he required that I sit with him.
Has there been any forward movement with anything at the
How many
airport?
minutes each item was going to take.
No, but I have my quarterly meeting coming up, so I'll get an update of where we are on that.
For somebody.
Information.
Right.
Push his button and turn their.
Still need to kind but nothing in terms of, it's shifting, but they are moving ahead with the development over there.
I know.
And 2025, their plan is in 2024, they will submit a request to FAA, wait for Ann, to do a 150 study.
Right.
It'll take them about 6 months to do that. So they're expecting in 2025 to have the 150 study done.
Right.
That's when the whole thing goes
That's
crazy.
gonna start, yeah, that's gonna start the snowball domino effect, yeah.
So, we just need to kind of work that piece of it and kind of come up with a plan of how we're gonna work through it. I don't know, that one's,
Yeah,
the
that
only
one's-
ones that bother me, that bothers me.
Likewise, because that takes effectively out a third of my stake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
overnight.
And once they get it, it may take a year or two if they get it. The problem is that if the Ogden Airport buys that property, which is what the FAA will authorize and provide funding to do.
Right.
It's a 90-10 split, 90% comes from federal, 10% from the city. Then technically, if that happens, then technically Ogden City will own.
The
that
hydraulic
piece.
ram shot in it.
That's what they need, because then they can methodically go ahead and.
This might be
remove
on the
it.
youth council
Even though it's
seat next
still
time.
Roy,
Right.
still Roy residents, they would go through that process, and it's very complicated, troubling,
Oh, yeah,
difficult.
Very troubling.
yeah,
Just creates a lot of problems.
Right.
I'm trying to see if there's ways we can work through that. The interesting thing, I don't believe the mayor will be there. I believe the city airport manager will be there.
right,
I don't believe the city manager will be there when all this comes down.
right, right.
Good.
Yeah. 'Cause that's gonna be ugly.
Yeah, I just have to watch it. Sorry for the delay. We're just waiting for 2 board members. Once we get them here, we're ready to roll.
Here's one. I don't know, she. Where?
Yeah, she's coming.
We were looking for you, because she was there, and then she disappeared, and you came back, and now we're, anyway.
This
Is
chair's,
there not a, you want me to swap out the youth council number one?
it's
All right.
fine. I'll do
All
it
right.
after this meeting.
Yeah, you're sure noisy over there.
Good
What's your
heavens,
problem?
try sitting next to him, he's like wiggling, he's
I
like,
know,
where's some
I
of my
was gonna
kids
text you and say, Joe, what's up?
This chair's, it's broken.
It's broken, he broke it.
Oh, okay.
That's what he doesn't want to admit, is he's the one that broke it.
Wasn't that way last time, so. I left it in good shape.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to the Roy City RDA Board Meeting for March 15th, 2022. Time is 8:03 p.m. Want to recognize that we do have Board Member Jackson with us tonight, Board Member Scadden with us tonight, Board Member Joe Paul with us tonight, Board Member Wilson with us tonight, and Board Member Sophie Paul with us tonight. With that, we'll go ahead and jump right into the consent items. Board, any comments or questions about the January 18th, 2022 RDA meeting minutes? Anybody have any comments, questions?
Make a motion, we adjourn. Yeah. Make a motion, we accept.
Thank you.
I will
Got a
never
little
mind.
confused there. We have a motion then to approve the consent items. Do I have a second?
Second, yeah.
Okay.
Tell where
Randy,
my mind's at.
Randy, you gave me a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. We got the consent items done. Now we have three discussion items I'd like to walk through. One is review and recommendation on the project area boundaries for the Front Runner Community Reinvestment Project Area. So with that, Randy, go ahead and we'll walk us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This map was included in your packet, but also we had a conversation about this, I believe, a month ago. This project area boundary map was adopted by a resolution back in January for the boundaries of the project area for what we're now calling the UTA Front Runner Station Community Reinvestment Area. We had at that meeting some conversation of whether or not this area should be this big or whether we should reduce this. And we're at that point where we need to make a decision, because the reason we need to make that decision is part of the redevelopment law, and I've given you a checklist of the steps that we have to go through when we create one of these community reinvestment. I just handed that out to you. One of the things that's required is we are required to give a 30-day notice to any property owner and to the taxing entities that are located within this reinvestment area of the notice of the public hearing. We're also required to put in that notice some other information, and so we need to know who to send those notices out to. Do we leave it as is and we send notices out to all of the property owners, or do we shrink it to a recommendation by Board Member Wilson to only include the UTA portion of this, which is about 20 acres of property? And Mayor, the Economic Development Committee, I didn't know if you were going to bring that up, but the Economic Development Committee met, and on a 4-to-1 vote, it was recommended that the project area stay as is. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. The biggest advantage of keeping the area a large area is that there's opportunity for other development in that project area that might create tax increment that we might be able to use to support the budget. We can use the money, tax increment, to help the development, which in this case, probably the only significant piece of property that would have a big development on it would be the UTA, but there are other parcels in here that there will be opportunity for development. But we can use that to pay for infrastructure, we can use that for water lines, we can use that to pave a road, we can use that money even outside the project area to pay for a road if it benefits the project area. So the budget that we put together will be based upon what we believe is the development that would occur. Now, there is a process we have to go through after we've created the project area, after we've gone through all of those 19 or 20 steps that I outlined to you. We still have to go to all of the taxing entities and ask all of the taxing entities to participate in our budget. So even though we've created the area, we've established it, no money can be spent, no money can be collected until we go meet with each one of those taxing entities and get their approval to participate in the project area. We know from previous experience with the Weber School District, they like to participate at 50%. Our budget is being developed, the development budget we're putting together is a 50% participation budget, because that's what we've been told that the school district would like to look at. We can ask them for more, but I think, again, where the main purpose of this will probably be residential. They'll probably want to stay at that 50%. Because, again, we don't know what type of units are going to be. We don't know if they'll be 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, or if they'll all be studio apartments, because we don't have a proposal for that. But the budget we're putting together is to meet that 50% requirement, so that at least we go in there saying, hey, we're meeting your criteria and would like you to participate. That's item number one. Item number two is, before we give any tax increment as an incentive to any developer, we have to come back and have you as a board agree to that participation. So even though we may have an agreement to collect the increment, and we may get that approved by the taxing entities, we still have to bring everything back to the redevelopment agency board for your approval before we even give that away. Now, that's for an incentive, but we can have in the budget, and part of the budget is going to be for infrastructure, because that might be developed by the city, whether there's a developer or not. We talked about maybe a road that might have to be built in this area. Well, if that's a city responsibility and we're collecting increment, we can pay for that with the tax increment and not the city budget. So there's different things like that we go through. And when we present the budget to you in the public hearing, we'll provide you all this information of how we calculated both the increment and how we calculated what we've come up with for participation in the budget. So I just want to make it clear to you that even though we're adopting an area, and even if the area might be as this large area, there are still some checkpoints we have to go through before we give any of the money away. And if at the end of the day, there will be a cap, that's the other thing the budget will be a percentage, length of years, and a total amount of cap. So the budget that we're going to present will most likely be the cap that everybody will agree to when we present that to the taxing entities. So the two things I wanted to tell you about was, one, that's why we need to do this, and then I've given you a checklist of all the steps that we'll have to go through to create this project area. The only step that we've done so far is number one. And we've got all these others to do, but it starts the motion. Once you decide on this area, it'll go fairly quick.
Okay. Board members, any questions, comments at this point?
I would just like to present my concerns about having the large area. You know, a CRA or an RDA is a redevelopment, and this land is open land, so there's essentially no redevelopment. So I believe it isn't really maybe the full intent of the project. But the most concerning thing is the money that could be that wouldn't be there for the children in the school district. You know, the school district receives about 50% of the taxes, and even if they participate at 50% of that, most of these homes will have children. They're going to be starter homes or apartments that there may be a lot, and so then the funds that would be needed to provide services for the children at school would then not be there for whatever period of time that is agreed upon. And with that, there will be demands on water and sewer, and they're about 11% of the tax bill. And so the concern is that what's happening is, if we were incentivizing developers, which right now we don't even need to incentivize, we already have developers that are interested in all of the main property that's open. So I don't believe that incentivizing them would be appropriate. Using them for the roads and things like that, that's basically what we're doing, is we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, or it's kind of like a bait and switch thing. You know, the school district may well have to raise taxes to cover the cost of these children that will now be using these resources, because they have now allowed us to take that incremental in fund. And it's different when you don't have a project that has a lot of housing that may include children, because maybe you wouldn't need as much for the school board to have that. And so my concern is that it's almost like we're using a little bit of a backdoor to pay for some things, because already taxes are being talked about being increased in several different entities. And so my concern is that really the UTA property should be it, because the other really doesn't fit, and we are probably not being as direct as we should be.
let me see if I understand. So your last comment probably is really the key. We're basically saying if we're going to do a CRA, just keep it within the UTA property and take all of the private property out of the conversation, or not have a
Yes.
CRA at all?
Leave the UTA in the,
Okay.
as the property, as our understanding is that's very important for the political and legislative future of UTA property and the city for the control. So I agree. I think that part of the, I'm willing to go for part of it, that may be the UTA property, but I don't believe that the rest of the property should be included in the CRA.
Okay. I just want to make sure we understood what she's suggesting.
You.
Because it really comes down, as Randy's opening comment, his comment would be is that you decide. You decide. And all we're doing right now is he's going to basically propose this map. And in this map, do you want this boundary to be the map as drawn, or do you want to only let the map reflect then, as Board Member Wilson suggests, only the piece that's in UTA? So all of the private properties, there's private properties on the north side, there's private properties on the south side, all those would be excluded from the map. And then the CRA, I think is what she's suggesting, would go forward, but the map would only show that portion which is owned by UTA.
Yes, that's what
Okay.
I believe would be more appropriate.
Okay. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
I do have a question for Randy. If the entities agree to a specific amount now, that's in like stone, right? So if we have up to 20 years and say things go crazy, the Weber County School District or whoever it is can't adjust the percentage they've agreed to within that 20-year or whatever that amount. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we do. We'll enter into an actual agreement with them that will have the percentage that we can collect, the years we can collect, and a cap. So if you are more productive in your redevelopment area and you create a locket increment, you may hit the cap sooner. That means the property tax can go back on the tax rolls sooner to those taxing entities.
But the taxing entities couldn't change that percentage if they want.
No.
Thank you.
It's set by agreement.
Just so we clarify exactly when we're talking about tax increment. Randy, I think we need to explain where the tax increment is. So if I was to buy a house there and say the value of that house was going to generate a tax revenue, I'm just hypothetically, it's going to generate $2,000 a year, okay, on that piece of property, back to the taxing entities, okay? And the base taxing revenue that is going back to everybody, this includes Roy City, the school districts, water districts, anybody that participates in that, and you don't have to go too far, but to look at those, your taxing document you have to find out all the organizations that you pay some taxing in when you get your slip. The first year, that's the baseline, so that's the established. It stays standard there. It's the gain that exists between the base year and the next year in terms of value increase.
That is correct. So what happens is when we establish the project area, the value, which is called the base year that you referred to, is whatever the current assessed value is of the property, and it'll go to January 1st of 2022, because we're going to create this project area within the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
So the law says you go back to the last equalized tax roll. Tax rolls are equalized on January 1st of every year. So that becomes our base year value.
So where does the revenue go there at that moment?
That revenue continues to flow to the taxing entities just like it always has.
Okay, so that doesn't change to
That
the
doesn't
taxing
change at all.
entities.
They
Okay.
continue to receive the revenue they have today.
Okay,
So when something develops, and let's use the UTA property, because right now, the UTA is producing zero property tax. There's no VAT, there's no property tax. So if that develops and somebody puts and I think in our budget, we've projected that property alone might create as much as $32 million of new assessed valuation. So when that new assessed valuation goes on and that tax rate is applied by all of the taxing entities, that may be $125,000 a year in property tax. So under the statute, the RDA would collect whatever percent of that 125 that was agreed to by the tax entity. So in this case, if it's a 50-50 split, the RDA would collect 50%, and 50% of that new growth goes back to the taxing entities. Right now, no taxing entity is planning in any budget to collect any money off of this property because it doesn't develop. They only see the gain when something new happens. And in the case of a redevelopment agency, we can go to those taxing entities and say, we have some opportunity to develop, we need some incentive money, whatever it is, and we'd like you to participate in our budget up to the cap amount that we have in the budget. And then they have to agree to do that. And they vote on that in an open meeting, goes to their boards, and they vote on it, and then we enter into interlocal agreements with them that specify those terms and conditions. So tax increment, when we're talking tax increment, is basically the increase in property tax that happens from any new development that occurs within that project area over that 20-year period of time until the cap is met.
Okay. Does that help? Just understand, because I think Board Member Wilson brings up a really good point. She's basically indicating that the school districts are deprived of some money, and there's no question there is some money of that's involved in that. Not all of it, because they would get some of that money back. But the key element would be is, and this is really the key, I think we just need to make sure we understand, it is as it sits now, nothing happens, nobody gets anything. And we're not getting a dime on that property, UTA property today, not a dime. But if a development goes in there, and we need to take some of the revenue that may be generated to help make that development work, or help the developer get that development to work, then it starts to generate revenue, a tax benefit. And that tax benefit then goes to all of the taxing entities. So going from zero, which is today, to something they get tomorrow will be some. It won't be all, because we're kind of getting agreement with them as a taxing entity, but they get some. But as Board Member Wilson says, it's not everything they're entitled to, because we need to get some of that money, we want to use some of the money to enhance that development. Otherwise, there may not be a development to generate any money
I was going to say, is it that the purpose of it is to jumpstart a development so we can start collecting money off of it?
Correct.
So if we jumpstart a development, we start collecting money that we wouldn't have collected anyway. So even though the school's not getting their full portion of it, they're still getting more than nothing.
Right.
Because if we don't do anything with it, they don't get anything.
Everybody gets what's already there. We don't cut into any values or anything that's already there. And I think the other really important thing that's put in the statute is they have to approve us to do it.
Right.
If they tell us, no, we're not going to give you the increment, then we don't collect the increment. And I have had project areas where I've had a school district say no, but I've had the county say yes, I've had the city say yes, so we collect everything but the school district's property or property tax. So that's I think the best thing about the law change that was made back in 2008 is you now have to go to every taxing entity and you have to convince them that what you're doing is of benefit to them and will benefit them either later or sooner or whatever, and get their approval to do it. But that's the most important thing is the first of all, we don't touch what's already there, and we're only talking about anything that's new and that's developed. And at the end of the 20 years, everybody, all taxing entities benefit from whatever that new growth was.
But what is the need to jumpstart at this moment? We already have developers who are ready to do it. We have a market that's already really going, and so I don't see that there's any redevelopment. And why would we need to incentivize people who are already really incentivized because of the market and what they're already planning?
Well, we don't know if those developers are going to need assistance or not. We don't know that yet. We have developers that have indicated that they would like to do development in that area. But until they get in and know what the price of the ground is that UTA is going to ask for, until they know what the entitlement process we're going to do, till they understand and run the numbers of what you've set as being the density that they can put on there, they may have a gap. Now, our incentive policy outlines a process that they have to go through. And one of the first things they have to show us is there is a gap. They have to demonstrate there's a need for any incentive. And that's going to be a pretty complicated process because we're going to be, I don't want to get into a lot of detail tonight, but it's debt service ratio. It's what the underwriters are saying. It's what the rent market does. Now, there might be another good thing to do here. We may tell a developer, we'll tell you what, we'll give you incentive if you do affordable housing. That's something that's missing. So that could be an incentive that we could use for a developer and say, we'll tell you what, we'll incentivize you. But to do that, we'd like you to say, if you're building 220 units, we'd like to have 10 or 20 or 30% be affordable housing. So whatever we give you goes towards affordable housing. Those are the kinds of decisions that the board will get to make at appropriate time. That's the information we bring back to you. That's where you make your decision whether or not an incentive should or should not be given. We've set a policy that says a developer's got to demonstrate that. We're just not going to write you out a check because we like you. You've got to come in and show us that you actually have a gap, or you're going to do something that will benefit the community. And right now, the big discussion is affordable housing. So we may just say, if you'll do affordable housing, we'll provide you an incentive to do that. So these are the types of things we can always use the increment for. But to answer your question, yes, we have interest, but no one at this day has come in because no one's done enough work to determine whether or not there is any gap on any development they might propose.
You mean for the UTA property? But, I mean, there are two people that have purchased the property between the tracks and
That's
looking
correct.
at the other,
and they have not come in and asked for anything at this point in time. But if they're in the project area, we gain that increment that can be used to reduce. That's one of the things that happens if you collect more increment. You're getting closer to your cap, so the benefit is you reduce the years that you need it, and everybody gets up back on the tax rolls at a faster pace of time.
Okay, other thoughts? So really what is here, and we just need to kind of make sure you kind of have an idea how you like to approach this, is you have a map in front of you. Are you comfortable with the map as is, or do you want to scale back the map in terms of the properties that are actually in here? And that's really what we need to define. And then second part would be is that, and maybe, Randy, we just need to clarify exactly what that means for this. If we scale back it and the CRA area that we're talking about is scoped, that's okay, but that's the area that we go in with the CRA. Everything else is taken out of the equation.
Yeah, we take whatever we decide to be in the boundaries of the CRA, that's what we collect increment from. That's who we give notices to. That's what we prepare our budget on. So it's just that scope. Keep it as is, which is a bigger scope, or reduce it to a smaller area and reduce the scope that we have to go through. That's basically what we're doing.
Now, in the public period, just help us clarify this last piece. During the public session, because you're going to give 30-day notifications to all of the property owners that are involved, they have an opportunity to approach this board and request their property be removed.
That is correct. And I think at the last time when we kind of started having this and we went through that discussion, we had a lot of property owners who were up above this that were not in the project area that showed up and had a ton of questions for us. In fact, that's why we delayed it. But we had, if I remember right, we had 2 or 3 property owners in the project area that did ask for their property to be removed. But we didn't take a decision on that because the decision was made right out of the way to table this indefinitely, which basically killed it. So that is correct. At the public hearing, any property owner in this project area can come before the board, can talk to you, and can ask you to remove their property. Now, you're not required to remove their property. That's not what you have to do. The statute says this: if more than 40% of the owners of property within the project area protest at the public hearing, then you're required to go and have a public vote on it. if 60% or more of the property owners protest at the public hearing, then you can't create the project area. Because UTA is the biggest property owner, I don't think we're going to get to 40 or 60% unless UTA comes in and says, we don't want to be part of the project area. Because UTA owns about 22 acres of this project area we're doing. So what we can do though, a lot of redevelopment agencies will do that. If a property owner doesn't want to be part of a process and they're not critical to any development, okay, we'll redo the boundaries and we'll take you out.
Okay, so let's make sure we understand that, board members. When that public setting take place and the property owners then approach you in the board meeting, if it's in it today and you set this up, if you were convinced that it's time to take them out, you then take them out. And you may have most of them in here come to you and says, I don't want to be a part of this. If you decide you don't want them on there, then they're taken out of this project area. We okay with that? Because there's a timing.
Become a voter, how does that happen?
Well, what the process would be is the notice that we give says that at the public hearing, any property owner or anybody in the public can come and make comment as to whether or not whatever they want to say. And then the board has the option to either adopt, amend, or reject. So the proper way would be in that public hearing, after you heard that, you would just make a motion that we remove the following parcels of property. And we'll take notes of whoever does that from the project area, and then it's just voted on by the board at that meeting, in that public hearing.
And then that's it. It's now done, and everything then now can move forward based on that decision. And the best part about that would be is the property owner then is going to stand in front of you and they will tell you exactly what they think. And you can then vote as a board, says, I agree or don't agree. And if you agree to take them out, it's done. And then the CRA then does not include. But just for clarification, how easy is it to get them back in if they come back a couple of years to says, I want to get back into it?
The only way you can get back in is if the board decides to go through an amendment process, which basically means we're starting over.
So if there's a property owner that asks to be removed and then they sell it and the new property owner wants to be a part of it.
He cannot be part of it. They cannot be part of the project area once they've been taken out. The only way you can extend a project area is by going through an amendment process. And that's basically starting another 30-day notice, another public hearing, and doing it that way.
Okay, a little complicated, but we just want to make sure you feel comfortable where we go from here in terms of what we do with the proposed map that's sitting in front of you.
So is this something we vote on tonight?
We need a decision because
it's
I got to get notices out. So if you're going to shrink the area, now's the time to shrink the area. Right. The survey area resolution said this was the area that we were going to survey and do. So this is the area. But the board has the right, before we send out notices, to change this area.
So then I make a motion to approve it the way it currently is constituted.
Well, yeah, all we're going to do is just simply agree to go one way or another, so he can do that because we're not.
We've already got a resolution that approved this area.
Yeah,
okay.
it's done.
That's done.
Now what we're asking for is, because of the comments that were made when we presented this, do you want, based upon the comment from Board Member Wilson, do you agree that the area should be shrinked to just include the UTA property? That's what we're asking you.
Right.
If you agree, then that's fine. We'll amend the project area boundaries, we'll amend the map, and we'll be sending out one property owner, one notice.
Right.
It'll be UTA. It's not like planning. We don't notify 200, 300 feet of this property owners. The only people that'll get a notice are the property owners in this map. Nobody else gets a notice. Right. And then we publish it on the Utah Public website, the public hearing, and it goes on your website. That's the new law. The law says now, instead of putting it in the paper, it goes on your website and goes into and that notice is sent out 2 weeks before the meeting. So that's the general notice that goes out to everybody that we're having a public hearing. but it's only the property owners that get the 30-day notice.
Just by quick count, that's 9 property owners.
I think it was 9 or 10, as I remember right.
10 if you factor out Roy City. 'cause I
We
don't think
got to
have
include you, but
Do we really? Oh, that's funny.
even though we know you're having a public hearing, we still got to
Okay.
include you in the notice. I know that's crazy, but hey, that's what the law says.
I didn't count Roy City because I figured knew what we were getting.
So there'd be 10 property owners that'd be getting notice under this map.
But remember, the only thing I would suggest to you to think about is that the property owners have not voiced their opinion. That process has not happened yet. The worst thing that can happen would be is that we exclude them here today, tonight, and then they come into the meeting and says, "Why did you take me out?"
Right.
Because they didn't have a voice in it. They didn't have a say in it.
There was actually one that wrote an email specifically stating he didn't want to be removed, as others were, because he wanted the ability to, it's the guy that owns the inn, Todd Potter.
He wanted to use the increment. He was
Yep.
thinking of business expansion and building expansion. He thought maybe the increment might be a benefit to him.
Yeah, but that was you're right, that was a
So they still
previous
have the
meeting.
option to come, even if we leave it as is, they still have the option to come
Come in
forward
and ask, yeah.
at a public hearing and request
Removal.
to be removed.
That is
Yes.
correct.
If we remove them tonight, we don't give them the option to.
Right.
That
So
is correct.
that's why I made the motion. Maybe it doesn't need to be a motion, but
Well, I
somewhere
just
you
need
gotta
a
vote.
head nod because we're going to have to give direction because he's got to provide a 30-day notice. And although this is a discussion item, it's not a vote item.
No, it's just a discussion, and I think that it would be like anything else where you have a discussion. You've heard Board Member Wilson make I won't call it an argument, but she's made a suggestion that this area be reduced to just include the UTA. And I guess the question is, do you agree with that? Do you want to leave it as is? And that's really what the discussion is. You don't have to vote on anything, just do you like the map as is, or do you want to agree and reduce the area? It's a simple question.
Yeah, leave it as is and let the property owners come forth if they want to be removed.
That's what I think too. Just leave it as is, and then those property owners that want to come forth, then they'll come forth.
Okay. Joe?
I made the motion, so
He agreed.
Okay, so the
I retract the
majority-
motion and agree. Leave it as
Majority
is.
basically believes leave it as is, but board members, keep an open mind, because if they do come, these are the owners of the property, they kind of have a voice in this conversation as well. And it may very well be if there's 9 of them, you could see 3 or 4 of them simply say, I don't want to play. And if you just be open-minded to the idea that says, it's okay, then you can at that moment, what I'm sensing, at that moment you can say, okay, you're willing to at least have an open mind to consider taking them out of the project area. And that's what Randy's saying is. But, let's don't lock in anything. Let's just recognize the fact is there's probably 9 or 10 property owners that may have an issue that would like to have a voice in what they're going to do with that property or not.
Yeah.
We okay with that?
Right, they're property owners, they should have a say with their property, for sure, so.
Randy, is anything else you need on discussion number 1?
No,
More than that?
So with that, we're going to finish the plan, finish the project area budget, and we'll get and figure out what's a good day for the public hearing after we issue the 30 notice. My guess in this, we're probably going to have this public hearing in May. That'd be my guess.
Yeah. Okay. We do have the status of the Woodbury pad within the Marketplace development located approximately 1875 west, 5300 south.
This will be quick.
Yeah, we already discussed.
Board member Scadden had brought this up in a question, and we felt like whenever a board member asks something, we want to give you the same update, just a courtesy of that. So Woodbury's has a pad, and Woodbury's has received a letter written by the mayor indicating that if they don't have a development on that pad that's tax producing, by the end of this year, they owe us back $35,000 plus interest. And the interest rate is based upon whatever the interest rate is if we had that money in our state treasury pool savings account, which isn't a lot. The Woodbury had submitted a proposal to the city for a building that would have 2 tenants. Both of those tenants were drive-through types of tenants. One, they did tell us, was a soda shop. We don't know who it was. We take a guess and said maybe it's, it's either Swigs, it's who we thought might be the tenant. I knew from the other one, it was a restaurant that was going to do both drive-through and some set-down. They needed both of those to build that building. The bigger tenant pulled out. So they could not move forward with the development of the building until they find another tenant to fill that. The soda people are still on board. They are still there. I believe in talking with the representative for Woodbury, they have an option on that that runs out either in April or May. So Woodbury is really trying to scramble to find the other person to fill that building. If they don't get it, then I think, you know, as that clock keeps ticking, if they don't have somebody by June or July, then I don't think they're going to have somebody on there by the end of the year, and we'll probably press them to just give us back the money.
Right.
But they are actively pursuing the development of that pad, and I think that's the most important thing. They're not sitting on it. They're not waiting. They want as much as a business on that pad as we do because they get the rent. So they are actively working. We were excited because we thought we had it, but now that they pulled out. And the reason they pulled out is because they found another location that was a little bit better for them.
Who was
Not
it?
rent-wise, but they
Who
found
was
it.
it that pulled out, you know?
What? Who's the
Who
tenant?
was the business that pulled out?
I don't know what
You
the
don't know.
tenant was. I've done some guessing, but I'd rather not go on public record with a guess. But they just had to pull out. They found another location, a little bigger building they could go into, and a little better place for them to be where they wanted to be.
So
And it
it's
wasn't on Riverdale Road.
I was wondering where the contract said that they had to have something in by, I believe, January 1st of this year, but not pay it. So I was wondering, how did that work out for us to be able to extend that? I mean, if that cutoff date and they didn't have it, why or how legal are we able to extend that? Even though we're giving them time to pay it back, how do we extend that time to let that?
In the original negotiation, it was that they had to get the tax entity in by last year. If they wanted to extend it, they would have to come back to the board to extend it. So right now, they owe us the money on the 31st. If they have a taxing company in by the 31st, they would still have to come in and get your guys' approval for that.
And that was a really good clarification point. Thank you very much. We haven't given them an extension for anything. Right now, as far as we're concerned, they owe us $35,000 plus interest.
Right.
But because they were pursuing this building, that we thought they would be coming in and asking us, would you be willing to extend that until the end of the year? I told, as I was talking to the rep, he said, we're really, really, really trying to find somebody. We just want to get this done. We think this is beneficial for both of us. And he asked me, he said, well, can I come in and ask for an extension now? And I said, no. Don't come in and ask for an extension until you have something to deliver.
Right.
Because your answer is going to be no. I said, I'll save you a trip to Roy. The answer is going to be no. I'm pretty much sure the board would agree with this because that's what the staff would recommend.
But here's the thing, is there's conditions tied to them paying us back, correct? We control the narrative in terms of what they take and can put on that pad?
Yes, we do. It has to be a sales tax
revenue.
producing.
Can't be a bank,
Can't be a
Can't be a
office.
bank,
Can't be a
can't be an
dentist's
office,
But-
can't even be an insurance agent.
But the minute they go through and repay that, those terms are
That
void.
is correct. Once they pay us back, those terms are voided, and they could put whatever they want on that.
That's one of the
on that
things,
pad.
I mean, to look at it this way, we kind of have them on the hook.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you take the money back, it opens it up to do whatever they want to it.
Right.
So I'm not proposing that we leave it any longer, but yeah, if they could come up with something by the end of the year, I would entertain extending it.
Well, that's what we told them. They need to come back to us when they have a retail tenant that meets the conditions that we put on there, and then you would consider whether or not it's worth extending or not. And what we would most likely do in that scenario is we'll know who the tenants are, we'll look at what their sales tax producing is, because you can get an idea of that, and then come back to you and say, for your $35,000, if you extend, you're gonna see this amount of revenue coming into you.
Right. Yeah.
How long do they need to maintain that part of the bargain? So they get these two companies in by next January 1st, 2023. They don't have to pay back the money. Does that mean this is in perpetuity, that they need to have sales tax revenue,
We only-
businesses, or?
No, we only put in the agreement that they needed to bring to us for the extension was a sales tax producing
And so
thing.
if they close that down on January 2nd?
If they close that down on January 2nd,
Lucked
then
out.
that's right. That's right. That's a
Probably
risk
cost
we
them more
take.
than 35,000 to open it and shut it down.
Yeah. I think there's always a risk, again, with retail. We always know that, the studies and the stats show that 95% of your retailers fell. That's just a stat nationwide. But what they're looking at they're looking at national brand types of tenants that don't have that. They're not looking for a mom and pop. They're looking for a national brand tenant that can come in there and be sustained. But yeah, you are correct. That could be one of the things, the risk that we would take.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, question about the Woodbury pad? Okay, let's talk about the review of the first quarter strategic plan, goals and objectives.
I gave you a handout, and what I want to talk about are just those changes in red. So in the strategic plan that you just adopted a couple of weeks ago, we had some goals that we needed to accomplish in the first quarter. Well, the first quarter ends in 2 weeks. And it took us a little longer to get the plan in place than we had anticipated. So what I'm recommending, or just giving you, maybe get your consent that you don't have a problem, but more of an understanding, because this is accountability. And we told you we'd be accountable for the plan and we'd be accountable for the goals. The goals that I have listed are the ones that were to be done in the first quarter. What we're suggesting is number one, which is a review of the commercial areas established in the general plan, that we identify areas and property that have potential to develop and grow the tax value for the city. You're still working on the general plan. Those areas have not been defined. We have an idea what they are. We've started some of this property looking at it because we're kind of doing a property inventory anyway. But what we're saying is we will continue that and close that out in the second quarter. The next goal, it's a similar type of thing. We've got to get the general areas in place, got to look at the property, and then we continue to do the property inventory. We started a property inventory. I have driven down 6,000, 3,500. I've hit all the commercial areas, and I've got a list of properties that are listed for sale. So we've started some of that. But to finish that, we'd finish that in the second quarter. We will adopt, we don't have a meeting, but at the next RDA meeting, we will adopt the tax increment policy and the land purchase policy. So that one will be completed in the first quarter. Create the community reinvestment area. Again, we started that in the first quarter, but we will not complete that until in the second quarter. Number 5 is a meeting with key retail commercial brokerage firms and conduct site visits on available defined property. We got to get the property defined before we have the site visits, so we're going to do that in the second quarter. And then prepare and implement a business retention survey for the purposes of identifying issues and concerns regarding the business environment and city performance. In the initial strategic plan, we had the Business Advisory Board helping us with that. Now that we don't have a Business Advisory Board, we're going to have to sit down and figure out what's the best way to do this survey. So that'll be in the second quarter. And same thing with the community profile. We're working on the community profile, but we won't have that totally completed until the second quarter. And we're going to need that community profile when we meet with our retail brokers and start looking at property. So those goals all kind of tie in together. So it's more of an informational type of thing that these goals have been bumped, and we want to give you the reasons why we are bumping them.
Just a clarification, I think there's coming, don't we have an, gonna get this messed up, ICSC conference?
We do, it's in May, and we need to have a conversation of, because that was one of our goals, is to attend the ICSC.
Is that the one in Las Vegas?
Yes.
That I attended a few years back?
Yes, and they've gone back to now meeting in person. They didn't do it for the last 2 years.
It's actually a very good conference.
So we just need to decide who's going to go. We'll have to get some registration. We'll have to get some stuff doing. Generally, we've sent maybe 2, maybe 3 people to that conference. But yes, that is coming up, Mayor, at the end of May. or Mr. Chair,
And
sorry.
then probably there'd need to be some information that would need to be developed between then. Okay, board members, any questions, any comments you'd like to bring up? Okay, thank you, Randy, appreciate the input. With that then, do I have a motion then to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Randy, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ann. I was getting a little nervous. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Okay, good meeting, good information.